At Duke Regis's mansion, the man informs his son, Thor Regis, that the Dulgarian Empire will send him as a hostage to another country. Surprised, the young man reacts in confusion as he is told that the carriage has already arrived to take him away. The Duke coldly tells Thor that he is no longer wanted. Confused, the young man asks why he must be sent as a hostage to another country. His father answers that it is because he is useless. Shocked, Thor can hardly believe what he hears, remembering that this was the first time he had seen his father in 3 years. Thor recalls when he left home at the age of 13 to look for work, determined to live as a commoner, and never returned to the Duke's mansion. 3 years passed until the family soldiers found him and brought him back without explanation. He carries the weight of his father's words, who always said that without combat abilities, he was of no use at all. The captain of the guard is summoned to speak about Thor's evaluation. He explains that at the age of 10, Thor underwent a skills examination at the temple, but he showed no combat aptitude at all, something grave for the Duke's eldest son. When Thor was 15, a new evaluation was conducted. They confirmed that he possessed only basic magic, with no offensive skills, which made him a target of shame and contempt for everyone. Many called him a disappointment and said he was not worthy of being a duke's son. His father recalls that he had high expectations for him, since their family was known for its combat skills, but now accuses him of being a complete failure. Thor's father, furious, shouts that he has no combat skills, not even attack magic, something unacceptable for the eldest son of a family with legendary ancestors. Desperate, he asks if Thor understands the shame he brings to the family. Shaken, the young man thinks that this was the cruel fate reserved for those with no combat ability. It is explained that the Dulgarian Empire values combat skills above all else, since even nobles are recognized for their strength and descent from warriors. Those without such abilities end up despised. Thor admits he has no fighting talent, but reveals that he does possess the skill of alchemy, something his father regards with disdain. Thor tries to explain that his alchemy can be useful for repairing and even creating new items, mentioning that he works managing materials at the government office and dreams of opening his own workshop in the future. But his father, furious, interrupts him with shouts, saying it is worth nothing and ordering him to shut up, showing complete contempt for his efforts. His father mocks his idea of creating new items, saying that the Empire already has the sacred swords and shields of the heroes and needs nothing more. He then declares that the decision has already been made. Thor will be sent as a hostage. Resigned, the young man understands he cannot change his fate, and only asks for details about the place he will be sent to. Thor learns that the place where he will be sent is extremely dangerous, since all previous hostages of the Empire disappeared without a trace. Shocked, he suspects it could be the Demon King's territory. His father avoids confirming, but his expression makes it clear that Thor is right, deepening the young man's despair. Thor discovers that he will indeed be sent to the Demon King's territory. The Empire maintains a secret agreement, offering hostages as sacrifices from time to time to appease the demons and demihumans, described as bloodthirsty. Shocked, Thor wonders if he is truly being sent to die, while the guards treat him as nothing more than a disposable offering. Thor is brutally struck in the stomach by his father, who ends the conversation by saying that everything has already been decided. Fallen and in pain, the young man, confused and wounded, can only think about how everything reached this point. Staring at his father with hatred, Thor declares that he despises him and calls him by name, Duke Balga Regis. The Duke, cold and merciless, replies that he does not speak to dead men and sentences his son, saying he is already dead. Thor narrates that he was banished from the country where he was born and raised, taken away in a carriage under escort. As he thinks about his fate, he questions what the Demon King's territory really is, a land inhabited by demons and demi-humans, ancient enemies of mankind. It is revealed that hundreds of years ago, the Demon King advanced against humans with a powerful army. To face him, humans resorted to summoning heroes from another world. After fierce battles, these heroes and soldiers managed to drive the demon army out of human territory. Since then, humans and demons have not fought direct wars. It was established that the southern border of Teikoku would be human territory, while beyond the forest to the north would be the land of demons and demi-humans. Since then, there have been no major conflicts, but it is said that the Demon King and those driven north harbor deep hatred for humans. Thor thinks about the mystery surrounding the Demon King's realm. Locked inside the carriage, Thor cannot see anything through the boarded-up windows. He realizes he is surrounded by 30 guards, including cavalry soldiers, and understands it would be useless to try to escape, as he would be captured quickly. Bitter, he thinks he should have cut ties with the Duke from the beginning. Inside the carriage, Thor realizes again that he cannot see through the closed windows. He notes that he is surrounded by 30 guards, including knights, and understands that escaping would be pointless. Sitting, he bitterly thinks that he should have severed ties with the Duke long ago. Thor recalls that he took the government job exam using his mother's surname. He was assigned to organize documents and repair items, a simple and poorly paid job, often scorned by other departments. Even so, he valued his role and took pride in the service he performed. Thor remembers how he could make good use of his alchemy skills at work, especially in repairing items. However, he regrets being interrupted in the middle of fixing a magic sword, wishing he could have perfected it. His memories mix with his father's cruel words, calling him a dead man. Thor takes a spoon used by a soldier and activates his alchemy skill. Focused, he makes the metal melt in his hands, demonstrating the unique power he possesses, even though it is not a combat ability. Thor reveals his true skill, alchemy. He explains that he can transform materials like metal into new forms and even create different items by combining them. This technique allows him to purify, synthesize, and process substances, showing the value of his unique aptitude, even if it is not for combat. Thor dreams of one day opening his own workshop and being recognized as Thor the Alchemist. Holding firmly to his determination, he thinks he cannot die there, resolved to fight for his future. Thor's carriage approaches the border with the Demon King's territory. The soldiers warn each other to be cautious and call for him, ordering him to step down. Thor gets out and is escorted by the guards, following the path ahead. Thor reaches the end of Taikoku's road, the limit of the human world. Ahead, the dark forest marks the border with the Demon King's territory. Worried, he asks the soldiers what will happen to him, who will receive him on the other side, but realizes that not even they know for sure. The soldiers fire an arrow as a signal toward the forest. Soon, footsteps echo among the trees, revealing the approach of an imposing figure. Thor watches nervously as a demi-human, resembling a minotaur, emerges before them. The guards confirm that the receivers have arrived. From the forest, powerful demi-human warriors appear, with muscular and imposing bodies. Among them walks a young woman with a delicate appearance, but with sharp and confident eyes. As she approaches, she opens an enigmatic smile, making it clear she is a figure of authority among the demons. 3 imposing Minotaur warriors advance through the forest, each displaying intimidating physical strength. Thor watches the scene tensely and worriedly, surprised by their overwhelming presence. Thor sees a Minotaur up close for the first time, and also notices the presence of an elf beside them. Nervous but trying to remain calm, he decides to make a good first impression to buy time. He politely introduces himself as Thor Regis, from the Dulgarian Empire, while thinking about finding a chance to escape. An elf named Mabel Refrain politely introduces herself to Thor, saying she came to fetch him on behalf of His Majesty, the Demon King. The formality and courtesy in her words surprise Thor, who expected to be treated only as a hostage or sacrifice, not received with such respect. The human soldiers remark that tradition dictates approaching demi-humans, unarmed but recall their power. Elves capable of defeating dozens with a single spell, and minotaurs strong enough to crush a person's head easily. Nervous, Thor realizes that his guards know nothing and only treat him as disposable cargo. He questions why he should trust or approach them while noticing that the soldiers do not even attempt to speak with the demi-humans. Thor formally introduces himself as the eldest son of Duke Regis, sent by the Emperor of the Dulgarian Empire to accompany them. Trying to maintain composure, he thanks them for their reception and cautiously asks where exactly the Demon King's territory lies. Mabel watches him closely, evaluating his words. Mabel smiles gratefully and says this is the first time she has received such a polite greeting from the Empire, revealing that the Demon King's territory lies north of there. Thor responds formally, stating that he hopes to work well with them. Meanwhile, the human soldiers comment about signing the delivery documents, calling him a messenger, which confuses Thor, since he always believed he was being treated as a mere sacrifice. Mabel declares that the delivery of the messenger is complete and informs them that from there, she will proceed through the forest, accompanied by her Minotaur guards. The human soldiers, terrified, flee in panic, afraid of being killed. Meanwhile, Thor watches the scene, sighs, and accepts his new reality alongside the demi-humans. Mabel asks if Thor does not feel fear, and he admits that he does, but says it would be disrespectful to show it before them, since there is a peace treaty between humans and the Demon King's territory. Surprised, she comments that it is the first time she has met a human who does not show fear. Thor then realizes that, in practice, the Minotaurs treat him as a guest, even helping him with small difficulties along the way. Mabel asks Thor if he is tired, but he replies that he is fine, noticing how the difference in treatment between the Empire's soldiers and those of the demon territory is immense. While walking across the damp ground, Thor feels something strange. Magical energy begins to fill his body, something he had never felt while in the Empire. Thor feels the magical energy being absorbed into his body, and a voice announces that his abilities have fully awakened. His alchemy evolves into creative alchemy, allowing him to manipulate all attributes: light, darkness, earth, water, fire, and wind. He also awakens the abilities of material alchemy, attribute alchemy, and appraisal. Surprised, Thor realizes he now possesses a much greater power than he ever imagined. Thor learns the details of his new skills. Material alchemy allows him to create substances from his own magic power, synthesize new materials, and mold them into any form. Attribute alchemy makes it possible to add desired attributes to a substance, varying depending on the material. Appraisal, capable of analyzing the attributes, materials, and effects of any item, recording the information as data. Surprised, Thor realizes his alchemy has truly evolved and begins thinking about how far this new power might take him. Thor reflects that perhaps he never received combat skills because his true power was actually developing as creative alchemy. While processing this idea, Mabel watches him with concern and asks if he is unwell, explaining that in the Demon King's territory, the Earth's magical energy is different from that of the human world and can affect those not used to it. Thor speaks with Mabel about the different types of magical power. He recalls that in the Tycholi Empire, the powers of fire and earth were strong, with fire representing destruction and earth representing resistance. In the Demon King's territory, however, the power of darkness is predominant. When he asks if the power of light exists in the human realm, Mabel confirms it. At that moment, Thor realizes the reason for his awakening. He absorbed the dark magical power present in that land. Thor thinks about the difference in magical power between the realms. In the human realm, light is strong and darkness is weak, which made it hard for him to absorb dark magic while in the capital. In the Demon King's territory, the opposite occurs. Darkness is strong and light is weak. Thus, upon entering this land, he absorbed a great amount of dark magical power. This way, he gathered all the necessary conditions to awaken his supreme skill, creative alchemy, which requires the power of all 6 attributes: light, darkness, earth, water, fire, and wind. While crossing rough terrain, the Minotaurs warn Mabel to be careful. Thor thanks them for their support, but soon an accident happens. Mabel's necklace comes loose and falls to the ground. Note. Surprised, she tries to catch it, but the object rolls away, drawing Thor's attention. Thor notices Mabel's necklace has fallen and worries, asking if it wasn't an important gift from her mother. She admits it got caught on a branch and apologizes, but then smiles softly, saying it is fine, and asks him not to worry. Thor asks if he may try to fix the broken necklace, explaining that he has repaired chains like that many times. Mabel is surprised and asks if he is a craftsman. He reflects that in the Dulgarian Empire, it was not even permitted to call himself an alchemist. He never had his own workshop, never received requests, and only used his alchemy to repair items. Thor considers the possibility of becoming an alchemist in the Demon King's territory. With firmness, he declares, "No, I am an alchemist." Realizing he was already calling himself that naturally, he formally introduces himself. "I am Thor Regis, the alchemist. May I repair this chain for you?" Mabel observes him in surprise at his determination. Mabel asks if she can make a request, even though she is not human, and Thor replies that it does not matter. She then shows him her mother's pendant, saying it is very important to her, and asks that he repair it. Thor accepts seriously, activating his creative alchemy skill, as he declares that he understands the responsibility. Thor activates Appraisal Grasp and analyzes the pendant, discovering that it is a jewel, blessed by the spirit of water, containing a magic stone, but with damaged details and a chain weakened by time. He concludes that the problem lies in the broken chain and decides to use material alchemy, reinforcing the metal with magic power and water attributes. Thor focuses his magic power, using material alchemy, and makes the pendant's chain reborn as new, strengthened with earth attributes. When finished, he declares repair complete, showing the restored necklace. Mabel and the others are astonished by the result, admiring how the item has become even more beautiful and radiant thanks to the magical power. Thor finishes repairing the pendant using only magic power, impressing even the Minotaurs. He himself is surprised by the result, but stresses that it was just a quick fix and there may be flaws, recommending that a professional craftsman check it later. Mabel holds the now restored necklace, moved, and calls him directly by name, Thor, as a sign of gratitude. Mabel holds the pendant with tears of happiness, thanking Thor for fixing her mother's keepsake. The Minotaurs comment in amazement, saying Thor is incredible, and even wondering if he is a famous alchemist. Thor, relieved, simply smiles and says he is glad she liked it. Thor is moved, thinking this is the first time someone has shown so much gratitude for his alchemy skills, something that was never valued in the Empire and that his own father considered useless. Smiling, Mabel thanks him, saying it is important to help people, and asks Thor if he feels the same way. Emotional, Thor thinks to himself that he is happy to have come this far. He thinks about the ancient alchemists mentioned in history books who created magical items like swords and shields, imagining whether they also had the same desire to please people with their creations. In that moment, Mabel smiles at him and asks him to call her simply Mabel. Thor thanks Mabel for the guidance, calling her by name, and she, smiling, calls him Mr. Ferdioman. Thor, the alchemist. With that, he thinks that this was the beginning of his new life as an alchemist. Thor looks out the window and wonders if this is the Demon King's territory. He sees a vast plain and, in the distance, a great river where ships pass constantly. Surprised, he realizes that the ones operating the ships are fishmen. Thor appears firm and confident, holding a magical flame between his hands. Behind him, an imposing figure with shining eyes emerges like a powerful presence, further highlighting his determination and aura of strength. Thor observes the surroundings and notes the variety of demihumans living there. Bear, men, goatmen, women with animal traits, and even humanoid rabbits with their families. He remarks that, contrary to what the Dalgarian Empire said about the Demon King's territory being chaotic, the place seems calmer than the Empire itself. Everyone lives a normal life, without the constant threat that was imagined. Mabel comments that she would like Thor to do good work in the Demon King's territory too, since the population there is small and everyone needs to do their best. Confused, Thor thinks he was sent only as a hostage and questions what really happened to the humans who went there before him. Mabel explains that the last time a human was in the Demon King's territory was 50 years ago, even before she was born. Thor asks how it went, and she says they did not put restrictions on the person's behavior, but the forest path was dangerous, so she heard that he tried to return in secret. Thor only reacts thoughtfully, saying, "Is that so?" In the Demon King's territory, humans sent from the Empire are treated as guests. On the Empire's side, they believe they are sending hostages and sacrifices, and many try to flee. When that happens, they are considered missing, and nothing is reported back. Mabel comments that there is no alchemist like Thor in that territory, and asks in surprise, "Is Mr. Thor leaving the Demon King's territory?" Mabel asks Thor to stay in the Demon King's territory, saying she will help him live comfortably. She explains that he came for the sake of peace between the Empire and the Demon territory. Thor admits he thought about running away, but realizes that, since his freedom is not restricted in the castle, there was no point in planning an escape route. Thor thinks it was thanks to Mabel that he discovered the joy of working as an alchemist and does not want to disappoint her. He recognizes that she was the one who gave him the chance to call himself an alchemist. Determined, he decides to do what he can for the Demon King's territory while he is there. Mabel, touched, thanks him with a happy smile. As the carriage approaches the castle, Mabel tells Thor that in about an hour, they will have an audience with the Demon King and asks him to prepare. Thor thinks about the seriousness of the situation, remembering that the Demon King is feared and that, to live in his territory, one must never put him in a bad mood. Although Mabel and the Minotaurs welcome him warmly, Thor worries, wondering what the meeting with the Demon King will really be like. The Demon King's castle appears imposing, and Thor is taken with the group down a large corridor adorned with columns and guards. Ahead, seated on the throne, is the Demon King himself, watching in silence. Thor grows nervous, his heart racing, while Mabel smiles and tries to encourage him for the decisive moment of the audience. The great castle of the Demon King rises before them, and the group is led through the immense corridor, decorated with columns and aligned guards. In the distance, seated on his throne, the Demon King watches in silence. Thor, nervous and sweating, feels his heart accelerate, while Mabel, smiling, tries to calm him and give him courage for the audience. The imposing castle of the Demon King appears before them, and the group is guided to the great hall, surrounded by columns and watchful guards. On the throne, the Demon King observes in silence, conveying an intimidating presence. Thor is visibly nervous, his heart racing, while Mabel smiles, trying to cheer him up and give him confidence to face the approaching audience. One of the guards announces loudly the arrival of Demon King Rookie Everguard. Thor remains alert, tense before the situation. The Demon King, imposing, turns his gaze to him and asks directly, "Are you the guest from the Empire?" Demon King Rookie Everguard appears seated on his throne, wearing an imposing mask with an intimidating look. He presents himself firmly, declaring his identity. Before him, Thor bows respectfully and answers, "I am Thor Regis, a guest from the Dalgarian Empire." Thor introduces himself to the Demon King, saying it is a pleasure to meet him. The Demon King cuts the formality and gets straight to the point, asking what Thor can do for him. He comments that, since he was sent by the Empire, he must possess some useful knowledge or skill. A bit hesitant, Thor replies that he knows a little about alchemy. Thor thinks that if the Demon King is trying to make him work, he might be hired as an alchemist. The Demon King shows interest and finds it curious. Prime Minister Curve explains that alchemy is a technique that does not exist in the Demon King's territory, considering the Empire frightening for having enough alchemists to send one to another country. Nervous, Thor tries to downplay it, saying alchemists are common in the Empire. Thor is surprised to realize that he will be hired as an alchemist. The Demon King orders a workshop to be prepared for him, allowing him to do whatever he wants as a guest. Thor explains that alchemy requires equipment and also asks for a room near the workshop. The Demon King agrees to provide everything, leaving Thor astonished and unable to believe what was happening. Thor is surprised by how easily the Demon King accepted his proposal. The king asks him to make a list of what he needs and submit it, saying he should create whatever items he wishes to make the most of his skills as an alchemist. Thor asks whether, if the final product is good or useful, it would be allowed to mass produce it for the people of the demon territory. The king replies that this would not be a problem and asks what Thor's doubt was. Hundreds of years ago, humans and demons were in constant conflict. To face the powerful demons, humans summoned heroes from other worlds. These heroes possessed incredible abilities and fought for the humans, reaching levels of strength that even frightened the demons themselves. The heroes sought to become ever stronger, influencing even the Empire to believe that power is everything. This obsession with strength ended up being passed on to the humans of this world as, well, the hero finally defeated the Demon King, causing the demons to be exiled to the north. After that, he returned to his original world satisfied, and the summoning of heroes ceased. However, the knowledge and items he left behind remain to this day. The protagonist hears the Demon King say that the old story of the demon's defeat by humans is about 800 years old, but still relevant. The king states that he does not wish to be a ruler who fights, but rather someone who continues learning from humans. He declares he will not let those who died in that battle have died in vain, revealing that this is why they invite guests from the Dulgarian Empire to learn together. The Demon King states that only in his territory is it possible to make full use of an alchemist's power, and that this is necessary to catch up with the Empire. The protagonist is surprised to realize that, in that place, he is recognized as a true alchemist and has the freedom to create whatever he wishes. The young man declares that he wants to show what he can do with his alchemy and create something incredible using his special ability as a tribute to the Demon King. In response, the Demon King accepts and says he will place his trust in him, calling him Thor Regis. The Demon King comments that Thor must be tired from the long journey and suggests that he rest. Thus, the audience comes to an end. Outside, the city is shown, and among the gathered demons, the Demon King begins to prepare the next step. The Demon King gathers his commanders and announces that the matter will concern Thor Regis, the new guest from the Empire. Among those present are the Elven Commander of Magic, the Lizard Commander of the Assault Squad, and the Minotaur Commander of the unit. The Demon King makes it clear to his commanders that no one is to harm Thor Regis. He orders them to treat him with respect, speak with him, learn about the human world, and pass that on to their subordinates. The commanders respond that they understand, but the Elven Commander questions what there really is to learn from the Empire's guests. The Elven Commander smiles sinisterly and suggests showing Thor Regis the troops led by the descendants of the Fire Giant, so he can realize how frightening the Demon King's territory is. The atmosphere grows heavy, and the Demon King watches the proposal with an intimidating gaze. The Demon King acknowledges that it is not a bad idea to show Thor Regis the power of his territory and its magic, considering it a good suggestion. The Elven Commander thanks him, satisfied with the understanding, but the Demon King sighs, leaving in the air that there is still a but in his decision. The Demon King raises his voice, reminding everyone that in the past, the demons and demi-demons were almost wiped out for underestimating humans, believing they were not frightening. He reinforces that words belittling the Empire cannot be ignored, leaving the commanders frightened by his intensity. The Demon King warns about the Empire's growth, which continues to expand its territory and strengthen its power. He recalls that many humans possess strength superior to theirs, and asks how anyone can say there is nothing to learn from the Empire. Faced with his fury, the elf bows in apology, while the king mentions the name of the alchemist Thor Regis. The Demon King declares that Thor Regis, as a guest, will serve as an alchemist in his territory. He states that if Thor's creations pass Kreev's evaluation, they will be used there, allowing them to learn about the Empire's culture and techniques. The subordinates respond in unison, confirming the order, while one of the generals comments that His Majesty's words have been heard by all. The Demon King asks Mabel to restrain herself, and then decides to appoint her as the person responsible for Thor Regis, since everyone was curious about his abilities. He orders her to take care of him and watch over him. Mabel accepts with a smile, saying she will be happy to carry out the task. Meanwhile, another subordinate comments that Thor is the same one Mabel had previously defeated at the Pendulum. The Demon King wonders if Thor Regis really managed to generate magic silver without using any material. A subordinate confirms that the magic silver was used in the Water Spirit Stone pendant, and the Demon King says he has no doubts since he saw it with his own eyes. To officially confirm, he orders an appraisal to check if Thor's feat is real. Thor shows Mabel's pendant and asks if it's a keepsake from her mother. He reveals the magic stone in the center was damaged, but now it's fixed. Mabel, surprised, says the item's been passed down in her family for generations, but she thought its power was lost. The group talks about Thor Regis. One says the Empire wouldn't have sent him without ulterior motives. He might even be a threat. Another thinks that if there were many alchemists like him, resisting the Empire would be pointless. Mabel offers a third view. Maybe the Empire was foolish not to recognize Thor's talent and just tossed him aside. Mabel apologizes to the king and promises to stay cautious around humans, while the king decides to give Thor a room and workshop. Later, a young elf arrives, smiling to escort him, saying she'll take him to his room. She thinks they made him wait a lot and guesses he's tired and nervous by now. Thor perks up seeing all sorts of objects, curious about what they're made of. The elf, noticing, asks if anything caught his eye. He says practically everything did. She smiles, relieved, and says they'll first set up his room since they'll have plenty of time to talk later. Two lizardmen show up, saying they were sent by the Prime Minister's orders to stand guard. The elf is surprised she thinks it's overkill, since Thor couldn't defend himself against their claws if something happened. Even unarmed, she figures their presence might make him uncomfortable. Thor tells Mabel he still has a lot to learn and that he'll count on her. He explains he was shocked it's the first time he's seen lizardmen. Mabel notes it's also the first time she's heard a human call them by name. Normally they're just lizards or reptile men. The lizardmen pick up on that and say they get it after all. Their scales give them great strength and defense, so it's natural a human would be surprised. Thor wonders if their scales get stuck in fabric when lizardmen change clothes. Excited, he thinks of inventing a cloth smooth enough to prevent that. Mabel is surprised he was thinking of that. Thor, a bit embarrassed, confirms his idea. Thor says he's eager to learn how different races live. Mabel explains that in the Demon King's territory, there are many species and demihumans, each with their own unique issues. With determination, Thor says his dream is to create something that can change the world. He promises to boost the territory's technology by solving those races' problems, and wants to repay the Demon King for the chance to work there. Mabel can see he means it. Thor makes it clear with his expression that he doesn't care about racial differences. He just wants to fix demihumans and demons' problems as an alchemist. Mabel, moved, says she gets it and calls him amazing, then swears she'll help him with all her heart. They exchange words of trust. Thor will be under her care, and she, moved, feels she's found her purpose. Soon she imagines herself as the guardian of the one who'll change the Demon King's territory. Mabel recalls her painful past. Other elves rejected her, called her dirty for having human blood, mocked her for not using magic, and saw her as a disgrace. They treated her with contempt, shouted that she was useless, and told her to go away while she begged them to stop. She wakes up screaming "Stop!" from a nightmare, gasping as she realizes it was just another childhood trauma dream. Sitting on the bed, she thinks to herself if she'll ever overcome this haunting memory. Looking at her cold feet, she thinks it'd be great to get over her cold sensitivity along with her trauma. She eyes her slippers, feeling embarrassed about wearing them in front of Thor-sama, but knows she has no choice. She appears again, smiling softly as she puts on fluffy socks to warm her feet, looking content and at peace. Thor arrives at the Demon King's storage and is amazed by all the chests and items piled on the floor. He's surprised at the sheer amount dented shields, torn armor, even a discarded scabbard. While looking around, he spots a sheath thrown aside. He jubilantly raises his arms, saying the Demon King's castle is the best. Then he gets serious. He knows this space wasn't given out of kindness, but as an upfront investment. If he fails to prove his worth, his room will be taken away. Clenching his fist, Thor decides he must create something everyone, especially the Demon King, will love. With a confident smile, he starts planning. He finds a bunch of items that could be materials and gets excited thinking of something practical. He also grabs a specific book that catches his eye. The book has strange characters he's never seen. He figures people ignored it because they couldn't read it. Opening it, he finds info on a footbath, an item left by heroes from another world. It says it keeps feet warm with water currents and vibrations, always offering comfort. Reports claim it helps cold sensitivity, relieves fatigue, and even improves relationships. Thor is stunned. It really came from another world. He's amazed that something like that was here. He thinks he wouldn't understand another world's language, but suddenly realizes he can read it fine. The title shows up as e-commerce catalog. Confused, Thor wonders if it's his over-alchemy power, specifically appraisal, that lets him read it like any normal text. He figures his ability lets him grasp items' properties, explaining why he can read another world's language. Flipping through, he sees the e-commerce catalog lists many useful products, but only deliverable to Nihon, probably the hero's home country. He's certain the book belonged to one of the past heroes. Thor connects the dots. These otherworldly items focused on recovery, relieving sore shoulders, tired eyes, improving sleep, and more. Shocked, he thinks maybe that's why past heroes were so strong. Among the examples, glasses that boost vision 20-fold, capsules that make 2 hours feel like 10 hours of sleep. Surprised, he wonders if he could make similar items with his over-alchemy. He jumps when Mabel comes in with a tea tray. She says he was in the zone and apologizes for sneaking up, explaining she called but he didn't answer. Thor shows her the book, asking if she can read its otherworldly characters. Mabel says she can't understand a thing. Thor explains past demon kings kept useful items, which is why things like this end up in storage. Mabel teases him for not cleaning his own room, and they sit down. Soon she offers to make tea, and Thor gratefully agrees. Mabel says she's cold sensitive because mana doesn't flow well in her body. Thor is surprised. She explains that poor circulation keeps her from using magic and thinks it's linked to her grandmother being human elves, normally excel at magic. She tells Thor she was rejected by her elves, but embraced by the Demon King for her household skills. Thor is moved, saying it must have been tough. Mabel cheerfully says she doesn't mind not using magic and doesn't see her human link as a bad thing. Mabel adds she always had an interest in humans because of her grandmother, so she wanted to meet Thor first. Smiling sincerely, she says she's glad the first human she met was him, and thanks him for being as kind as her grandma. Thor's impressed with the Demon King's territory, how they accept people from all over and match them to roles that suit their skills like Mabel. Then he asks her to join him in an experiment. He finds an item described as a foot ofuro that keeps water hot and helps cold-sensitive folks. Reading closely, he sees it's called Footbath. The book explains the Footbath boosts circulation, warms, and stimulates energy points. Convinced, Thor decides to use broken shields from storage. He just needs a fire magic stone and a wind magic stone to recreate it. I la krabber de blubbled pause and decrete it. Those shields had fire and wind functions but were unusable. Thor plans to soften them, extract the stones, and kicks off his alchemy. He starts reshaping a shield into material for the foot tub. Mabel shows up with a new container, surprised he used a shield from storage. Thor thanks her and explains he'll combine it with alchemy. Determined, he begins copying the otherworldly item, activating over-alchemy to produce the footbath. He watches the arcane diagram form in the air as a guide and refines the materials. He imagines mana pouring from the magic stones into the water, picturing how the item works. He thinks it's impossible to perfectly replicate the hero world. Footbath tech's too different, but with magic stones and mana, he can mimic its functions. He'll use the wind stone for vibrations and the fire stone for heat, simulating strong water currents, warming vibrations that boost circulation and banish cold, plus acupuncture, point stimulation. In the end, he confirms it's doable. Thor completes the alchemy process and manages to create the footbath. Seeing the finished item in his hands, he smiles in satisfaction and declares it a success. Thor examines the newly created item and confirms its functions. The fire magic stone heats the water, the wind one creates the flow and bubbles, and the whole set guarantees durability of up to 25 years. He hands the footbath to Mabel, saying it will help a lot with her feet. Mabel is surprised by the speed, saying he finished in under 10 minutes, something unbelievable for the Empire's alchemists. Thor comments that he didn't even have that much practical experience, since his family never let him enter the ateliers. Make a third-person narration in a summarized and direct way. Do not narrate the kanji. Thor comments that he doesn't know much about other alchemists, remembering only his father's words, who said there were many at the same level as him. Imagining that, he assumes there are several scattered around. Mabel, surprised, is shocked by the idea that there are so many alchemists as skilled as Thor. Thor explains that it was nothing special, he just copied an item from the hero's world. He then hands the object to Mabel, saying it's for her. Surprised, she asks if she is really receiving that, while Thor confirms, and asks her to take him to a place with water to show how to use it. Thor gets ready to explain how to use the item, while holding the footbath. The Prime Minister appears unexpectedly, saying he wanted to see the items created. Thor, a little surprised, comments that he sees no problem showing it, since he used materials provided for free. Thor begins to explain how the footbath works. He puts water inside and asks Mabel to insert mana into the fire magic stone, making steam come out of the tub. Then he asks Mabel to put her feet inside, and she, a little shy, obeys and begins to dip them in the hot water. Mabel puts her feet into the footbath and feels the heated water, commenting that it's hot. Thor explains that there's also a wind magic stone at the front, which activates the vibration function. He asks Mabel to put mana into it, and she, still shy, follows his instructions. Mabel feels the strong vibrations of the magic footbath on her feet and legs, becoming surprised and speechless. Soon, she starts trembling and screaming in fright, completely flushed by the unexpected impact of the sensation. Mabel feels the water currents hitting sensitive points on her feet, making her body react involuntarily. Surprised by the intense sensation, she finds herself unable to control herself. Completely flushed, while thinking how the hot water makes her feel good and warmed all over. Mabel, already without strength to endure the intense sensations of the magic bath, screams desperately. Her body trembles and tears run down, while she can no longer control her emotions in the face of the item's overwhelming effect. Mabel, completely overtaken by the sensations of the magic bath, lets out a cry of pleasure and surprise, comparing the experience to being in paradise itself. The narrator compares the feeling to plunging into a hot spring in the middle of an extremely cold place, as if it were water reviving a dry land. The footbath eliminates Mabel's sensitivity to cold, and at that moment, a great change begins to happen inside her body, leaving everyone attentive to her reaction. Mabel, still panting, says she is fine and realizes that the mana in her body has begun to circulate correctly. The man beside her is surprised by this, but also acknowledges that he understands a bit about the heroes. Right after, he confirms that the item created by Thor came from the healthy goods of the hero's world, while Thor simply admits that yes. The Prime Minister reflects that there are no records of the heroes using items called healthy goods. He says that, as the name suggests, they served only to cure fatigue, but he doesn't understand why they affected Mabel's mana. Thor responds that the heroes are beings with immense mana and abilities, so it's natural that their items have this effect. He also reinforces that, in the end, they are objects of the heroes, which already makes them special. The Prime Minister is shocked, saying that not even in the Demon King's territory did they manage to fix Mabel's mana circulation, even with the best healers. Thor confirms that what they saw is the effect of a hero's item, something beyond their understanding, and thinks about how the heroes must have been proud of their own technology in their worlds. Meanwhile, Mabel, still weak, lets out a tired sigh. Thor asks how Mabel is feeling, and she replies that she is refreshed, with the mana flow finally working. He suggests that she try using magic, but Mabel is startled and refuses, saying she cannot use magic and had long since given up on it. Mabel, gathering courage, performs the magic chant invoking the Dark Wind. Dark Wind? Meanwhile, Thor watches confidently, sure that now it would be different and that she would be able to use magic. A dark wind suddenly explodes, surprising everyone. The horned man is startled by the impact, while Thor and the others watch Mabel closely. She remains still, surprised by the result, but it was clear her magic had worked. Mabel looks at her own hands in surprise, realizing that the magic really came out of them. In shock, she remembers how she was always called useless and a burden by others. Meanwhile, Thor approaches, worried, and asks if she is okay. Mabel jumps into Thor's arms, thanking him emotionally and calling him a savior. She says that now, with her magic working, she will be able to help more people and be useful to the Demon King. She also reveals that she was always humiliated in her village for being an elf, unable to use magic, and confesses that she lied earlier because in fact she was always afraid of never being able to use it. Mabel squeezes Thor tightly, leaving him in trouble until she is called to attention. Embarrassed, she quickly steps away and apologizes, while Thor, awkwardly, thanks her. Soon, they realize that it wasn't just the mana circulation that improved. Mabel feels her feet warmed, and notices that she no longer feels any cold, amazed by the change. The Prime Minister states that the item used is something of a hero, and that it will remain under the administration of the Demon King's territory. Thor tries to explain that he created it only to solve Mabel's foot problem, but the minister warns him about the danger. This item can awaken a person's inner magic, and if it falls into the wrong hands, it would be very risky. Even so, he allows that, if Mabel wants to use it, she may continue. Thor, in turn, feels happy to see that people are pleased using something he himself made. Thor thinks that he has no other choice and that, if he argued with the Prime Minister, he would only end up causing trouble for Mabel, so he decides to hand over the item without resistance. The Prime Minister says they will buy it at a fair price and asks if gold coins will do, since they are the currency used in that territory. Thor and even the minister are surprised by this unexpected proposal. Thor is shocked to discover that he will be paid for the items he made, since all he did was create things he wanted. He remembers that in the Empire, his work as an alchemist was poorly paid, with his skills included only in the salary, cheaply and unfairly. In addition, he could not use his creativity, only fix items the way they ordered. Now, he realizes that here it is different. He can receive fair rewards and still enjoy the joy of creating freely. Thor asks not to receive gold coins as payment, but rather magic stones, since this was linked to his next work. The minister questions this, remembering that the use of these stones could also result in the creation of weapons. Thor then suggests submitting a petition, explaining how he would use the stones and receiving only the necessary amount. In exchange, he would use materials and magic stones from the Demon King's territory to create useful items for them. He calls this the unlimited use plan for magic stones. The Prime Minister asks Thor if he doesn't mind the fact that his items will be used in the Demon King's territory by people who are not human. Thor replies that he sees no problem, since it makes no sense to create things that will not be used. He wants many different people to use his items and share their impressions, so he can create things that offset their difficulty. Thor smiles and states that his true goal is to create items that surpass even those the heroes possessed. Faced with this determination, the Prime Minister decides that he will negotiate directly with the Demon King. The Demon King is surprised to learn that Mabel managed to use magic thanks to an item created by Thor Regis. The Prime Minister confirms the information, saying that he witnessed it with his own eyes. The generals are shocked to learn that the alchemist managed to cure Mabel's magic ailment in less than a day, something that healers in the Demon King's territory could not do for years. The Prime Minister explains that Thor used two different magics in the Footbath. The Firestone heated the water, while the Windstone created flow and bubbles. He says that, in short, Thor dissolved fire and wind inside the water to heal Mabel, leaving everyone surprised by something considered impossible. Make a third-person narration in a summarized and direct way. Do not narrate the kanji. The council comments that, since Mabel is an elf of the water attribute, the mana dissolved in the water was easily absorbed. The fire served to heat and the wind to circulate, which not only eliminated her sensitivity to cold, but also fixed the internal flow of mana. Impressed, they recognize that Thor thought far beyond when creating the item. The council discusses Thor, saying that he may be an alchemist at a very rare level. One of them points out that the items he created resemble products from the hero's world, but with no records of granting powers. Another mentions that in ancient scriptures there are reports of strengthening and healing magic, which leaves the possibility open. The Prime Minister reflects on how he had never heard of an item capable of improving mana circulation and feels insecure in his role. Another member says he doesn't understand either, but they decide to hand the Footbath over to Mabel. They comment that she trusts Thor, and, being a valuable subordinate, they could not take away something that does her good. The Prime Minister comments that it is strange that Mabel trusts a human so much, since even in the Demon King's territory, it took her a while to trust them. He remembers that she was discriminated against in her village for not being able to use magic. Then he says that, because of that, he has a proposal to make to the king. The Prime Minister suggests that, if it is Mabel's wish, she should marry Thor Regis, so he would have a reason to remain in the territory. However, the Demon King reacts immediately and refuses the idea, saying firmly that it will not happen. Make a third-person narration in a summarized and direct way. Do not narrate the kanji. The Demon King becomes furious, stating that he will not allow Mabel, his subordinate and longtime friend, to be deceived by a human. He declares that, despite the truce, they are not beneath humans. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister tries to calm him, but the Demon King decides to act immediately. A man laughs arrogantly, saying it was a fitting end for someone useless. Then, a discussion arises about a request to repair a magic sword, requested by the imperial court. Some seem not to remember the request, but soon confirm that the request really existed, being to restore the magic sword that the princess would use, the same as in the time of the heroes. A man complains, saying the document shows that the magic sword was 80% repaired, but another explains that even when taken to alchemists' workshops, all of them refuse the repair. He reveals that the department's budget is always reduced, so they try to do as much as possible without spending anything. It is then revealed that an employee, on his own, had secretly been repairing the sword. The men argue about the employee who secretly repaired the sword. One of them reveals that he is already retired, which causes outrage for having let such a talented man go. His name was Thor Canna, but now, upon returning to the Duke's house, he is called Thor Regis. Everyone is intrigued and acknowledges that this man was truly fascinating. The men comment that Thor, back when he served the Duke's house, checked every item one by one and made repairs when necessary. However, he could never report his actions due to orders from above, and he never used the name Thor Regis, simply fulfilling his duty in silence. This caused indignation in some, but now, with him back at the Duke's house, there is hope that his situation may change. A man orders that Thor's name never be mentioned again, and says that the Duke's house will directly handle the sword's repair with the best alchemists. The next day, when they take the weapon to the most renowned atelier in the Empire, the alchemist in charge admits he is not capable of fixing it, leaving everyone surprised by the refusal. The alchemist explains that repairing a magic sword is not simple. He shows a crack on the blade and says that normally a swordsman could repair it, but since it is a magic sword, it is different. The blade's metal must have attributes such as fire and earth. For that, it is necessary to interfere with the material, fuse it, and align it with the surrounding metals, something only highly skilled alchemists can do. The alchemist explains that the ability to restore magic swords was lost over time, as the status of alchemists declined and their numbers decreased. He says that today there is no one in the Empire with that talent, but recalls that someone in the past managed to repair this sword's cracks. He comments that when he was young, he already told his friends that they would lose valuable items if they did not cultivate new talents. Hearing this, the butler realizes the gravity and grows frustrated. The alchemist examines the sword and is impressed by the technique used in the repair, saying the pieces were combined perfectly to the point where the original cracks cannot even be identified. He begs to meet the person who achieved such a feat, and even declares that he would like to learn from them. Nervous, the butler replies that this is impossible, since the one responsible was sent as a sacrifice, firmly trying to end the conversation. The butler, already impatient, orders the alchemist to repair the sword quickly, saying it does not need to be a complete repair, just to make it look fixed. The alchemist tries to explain that using other materials may cause many problems, but the butler interrupts him, affirming that the sword would only be used in rituals, with no need for real functionality. He pressures him further, making it clear that only the appearance matters, not the weapon's true condition. The alchemist sighs and accepts the request, saying he will only fix it to make the sword look presentable. The butler asks him to write a few lines in the requisition, confirming that it was only for that. Reluctantly, the alchemist agrees, thinking it would be troublesome if the blame fell on them. The scene then shifts to the Demon King's territory. The elf smiles cheerfully and offers food to Thor, asking him to open his mouth. He is surprised and embarrassed, but ends up accepting and eats. She thanks him emotionally, saying that thanks to him, she not only managed to fix her pendant, but can also now use magic. With that, she declares that she wants to repay the favor somehow. Thor asks if he could request another space to work from the Demon King, since using fire and chemicals in alchemy could damage valuable books and materials. The elf replies that it is possible, but since the nearby rooms are occupied, it would take some time. Thor then remembers that the king planned to turn the treasury into an atelier, but there are many valuable items inside. Thor says that in that case, he does not need a room, but rather wants Mabel to show him around the castle, since he does not know the place well yet. Excited, she accepts immediately, declaring she would even risk her life to fulfill Thor's wishes, which leaves him unsettled. She then happily leaves, saying she will bring tea, asking him to wait while she cleans something first. Thor is in the manufacturing room, thinking about how he could set up an atelier. He remembers that the heroes had similar magical items called storage box, storage skill, and item box. Flipping through the catalog, he concludes that the storage section might have something useful to create what he needs. Thor notes that the storage skill allows carrying many items without taking up space, besides organizing them automatically. He recognizes this as a lost technology from the era of the heroes. Flipping through the book, he finds something similar to the storage box, and thinks that if he can create it, he may discover more clues about that ancient technology. Determined, he decides to try. A presentation shows the iconic White Rabbit small-size storage room, an item that looks small on the outside but is huge inside, capable of storing a large amount of things. The description speaks of a metallic structure 2 meters high, 3 wide, and 4 deep, with sliding doors. Thor realizes that this is exactly the same ability the heroes used, confirming that the item is indeed called Small Storage Room. Impressed? He recognizes the value of what he found. Thor reads the description and is surprised. The item does not break, even if you put 1,000 rabbits inside. He discovers that the internal space is actually a separate dimension and much larger than it appears. Shocked, he wonders if that really means another dimensional size, realizing how incredible and absurd this artifact is. Thor discovers that for the heroes, the storage box was a separate space from where they took their items. The White Rabbit small-size storage worked like this kind of storage. He understands that maybe he cannot recreate something so perfect, but still decides to try. Impressed, he notes that this item can store up to 1,000 rabbits without any problem. Thor tries to use his creative alchemy skill to activate the small-size storage room, but realizes that although he meets the earth and wind mana requirements, he does not have enough dark mana. Frustrated, he concludes that he could create the item if not for this limitation. Thor notes that he does not have enough dark mana in his body. He thinks that in the Empire, there was not much exposure to this type of energy, which explains his lack. Worried, he reflects that it would be useful if there were someone nearby with a large amount of dark mana to help him. A demon enters Thor's room, asking to talk to him. At that moment, Thor realizes that the necessary amount of dark mana was absorbed, allowing him to create the item. Surprised, he questions why this happened, but quickly tries to disguise it in front of the visitor. Thor bows before the Demon King, but he asks that there be no formalities since he came in secret. Thor notices again his imposing aura and thinks that his garments and mask are also extremely powerful magical items. He recognizes the dignity of the Demon King and feels, by Alchemist's instinct, the hidden strength in his presence. The king then begins to speak directly. The Demon King thanks Thor for having allowed Mabel to use magic again and for solving her worries, saying that she is very important to him, almost like a childhood friend. Thor is surprised by the praise and replies that he does not deserve so much recognition. He remembers that since he arrived, Mabel has always taken care of him, and if he truly managed to help her, then that makes him really happy. The Demon King observes Thor and comments that he is different from the others who came from the Empire in past generations. While everyone was afraid and went back home, Thor remains calm. He considers him strange and interesting, but also suspects that Thor might be plotting something, asking directly if he is wrong. Thor, with a slight smile, responds enigmatically, leaving in the air the doubt of whether he was discovered or not. The Demon King grows tense and accuses Thor of plotting something. In response, Thor quickly opens a book and reveals his plan, saying that the truth is that he was only planning to create something showing with enthusiasm the designs of the project he wanted to build. Thor, with a cheerful smile, shows the project and asks if he can go ahead and build it, explaining that it is called Small Easy-to-Assemble Storage Room, which fits 1,000 rabbits and does not break. He comments that he would like to transform the internal space into a workshop. The Demon King, impressed, only says that he truly is strange, while Thor replies with enthusiasm. The Demon King recalls Thor's words about wanting to create things that surpass those of the hero's world and questions if that was true. Thor confirms confidently. The king is astonished, remembering that the heroes come from a much more advanced world. Then, Thor shows a trade catalog from the hero's world and says that fortunately, many items from there are listed in it. He cites as an example the footbath he made for Mabel, proving that he can recreate such invention. Thor speaks with determination, saying that by recreating the items from the hero's world, he will be able to understand how their technologies work. He affirms that this way he will further elevate his alchemy and use everything for the benefit of the Demon King's territory. Excited, he even imagines opening his own shop with a sign saying, "There is an alchemist here," in a place where he could easily obtain materials. Thor realizes he got too carried away talking about alchemy and admits that he always ends up daydreaming. He explains that he wants many people to use his items, give feedback, and thus he can improve them even more. The Demon King smiles and, finding it very interesting, says that the man from the Empire will create items that will even surpass those of the heroes, finding the idea truly fascinating. The Demon King formally introduces himself and tells Thor that he may go ahead and try, allowing him to show his ability. Thor, surprised, asks if it is serious, and the Demon King affirms that if he truly has so much potential, then he must embrace his ambition. Thor is moved by the encouraging words and thanks deeply, calling him Your Majesty. Thor confirms excitedly if he can really build the storage, and the Demon King allows it, as long as it is made as a workshop. Excited, Thor already prepares to start the creation using materials right away, but the Demon King is startled and tries to stop him, saying he did not expect him to do it immediately. Thor, nervous, recalls that it was the king himself who had given permission. Thor prepares metal materials recovered from armor and weapons in the warehouse. He notes that the small warehouse has specific measurements, but he plans to create a larger internal space. With accumulated mana, he decides to start construction immediately. Mabel comments that when Thor decides on something, there is no stopping him. The king watches intrigued, while she remembers that Thor had already said he wanted to create clothes that would not get caught on the lizardmen's scales, showing that he truly understands their needs. The king reflects on Thor's words, recalling that he said he would think about what the people of the Demon King's territory would need and create items to help them. Mabel reinforces that Thor can see needs without prejudice and asks the king to believe in him. Thor begins creating the warehouse, imagining the exact measurements and using pieces of metal as material. He channels dark mana to form the space, earth mana to stabilize the structure and reinforce walls, floor, and ceiling, and finally wind mana to fill the environment. Thor focuses his mind on every detail, hardness, color, mass, touch, and smell to shape the perfect warehouse. Determined, he activates his supreme alchemy and commands the creation of the small-scale warehouse. Thor finishes creating the small-scale warehouse, recognizing that he managed to reproduce its main structure, but without details like a drainage system and a lock, as mentioned in the catalog. He admits he is still far from reaching the level of the hero's items. Thor concludes the warehouse's creation, acknowledging that the items from the hero's world are still on another level, but he reaffirms his ambition to surpass them. The Demon King and Mabel are impressed that he managed to do it right there, praising his skill, although the king notes that the space is still small to become a true workshop. Thor explains to the Demon King that his warehouse works similarly to the hero's storage box, which has infinite space. He admits this is his first time creating something like this, so he is not sure how good it will be. He also reflects that perhaps there are no other alchemists capable of controlling space, since the Empire does not have much dark mana available. Thor receives permission to check the interior of the warehouse he just created. He comments that he would not have been able to do that with his own magic alone. Then he and Mabel inform the Demon King that they will be back soon and enter the place together. Thor and Mabel enter the warehouse and are impressed by the enormous interior space. Mabel remarks in surprise that such a space fit inside such a small box, and Thor runs excitedly, saying it feels like he could run forever without anything stopping him. She also notes that not even in the royal treasury is there an item like that. Mabel comments that that was technology from the hero's world, and Thor explains that, in truth, it was only a copy made from materials from that world, highlighting that the most incredible thing was the people themselves from there. He admits he is still far from reaching that level, since the hero's storage box had infinite space, while his abilities do not go that far. However, he points out that this does not apply to the small-scale warehouse he has just created. Thor explains that, by applying this technology, it would be possible to create bags with storage space. He then asks that, when he manages to make them, Mabel tests the prototypes for him. Surprised, she hesitates, saying she is just a maid and could not use such a legendary item. But Thor replies that she is important to him. She has already helped him in other experiments, and for that reason he wants her to be the first to use his creations. Mabel blushes and does not know how to react. Mabel becomes embarrassed, admitting to herself that she is happy and surprised whenever she is with Thor. Outside, the king calls out in concern, asking what is happening inside. Thor and Mabel answer quickly, saying they are fine. The king then decides to enter to check whether the place is safe and asks for permission to do so. The Demon King enters the warehouse and is impressed by the interior space, comparing it to the arena of his territory. He praises Thor, calling him incredible for managing to create something like that. Suddenly, a notification appears for Thor, saying that an SS rarity item has been detected and will be automatically stored in the space, leaving him surprised. Out of nowhere, the warehouse detects and automatically stores two extremely rare items, the Cloak of Obstruction and the Mask of Obstruction, both with resistance to all elements. Thor is shocked and confused, not understanding what is happening, while the items appear before him. A striking scene shows the girl appearing transformed. Her uniform now shines and is full of magical details. Petals float around her, reinforcing the air of majesty. With horns and a firm gaze, she conveys a powerful and elegant aura, as if she had just assumed a new form full of strength. The boy watches the transformation before him in surprise. With petals falling around and an imposing aura, it is revealed that that figure is, in fact, the true identity of the Demon King Luquir. He is shocked, unable to believe what he has just discovered. The girl crosses her arms and, with a serious expression, says that she understood what happened. Then she sighs and states that she forgives him. The boy, still embarrassed, thinks that it was his fault for having allowed her garments and mask to be automatically retrieved by the auto-organization feature, something he had forgotten. The image shows a colored cover of the manga. In front, the protagonist holds a book in one hand and extends the other forward, conveying confidence. Atragadevelard, Anicrossament. The narrator explains that the warehouse has the function of detecting rare items and storing them automatically. Because of that, the garments and mask of the Demon King Luquir were collected by the place. The Demon King Luquir covers her face in embarrassment and crouches down, while Mabel runs around in a panic, not knowing what to do. The protagonist tries to calm the situation, apologizing repeatedly, until both finally calm down. The Demon King Luquir, a little embarrassed, says there were no bad intentions and decides to forgive the protagonist. She comments that she could not assert herself as king if she showed her true appearance. Only her maids, her family, Mabel, and the Chancellor knew her real face. Luquir explains that she followed Kelvin's advice and used an item to alter her form, appearing to be a demon king. Mabel tries to comfort her, but she says it is not necessary. Then she states she already possesses powers worthy of a demon king, only with her body growing more slowly. Then Luquir decides to hear the opinion of someone from outside and calls Thor Regis. Luquir, a bit nervous, asks what Thor thinks about her true form as Demon King. He looks at her seriously, begins to respond by calling her Luquir Sama, and prepares to give his honest opinion. Thor speaks firmly, saying that upon seeing Luquir's true form, he felt as if he had witnessed the beauty of a deity. He admits that, as an alchemist, he had always found magical items beautiful, but her appearance made him rethink even his own sense of value. Luquir is surprised and confused by his words. Luquir, agitated, shouts that Thor would not understand what it is like to live hidden behind a mask, living a life as if it were a lie, since he is an alchemist with divine abilities. Thor looks at her seriously and replies that he has also been living like that, revealing his own pain. he apologizes, leaving Lukier surprised. Lukier, furious, says that Thor could not understand what it is like to live behind a mask, feeling that life is a lie, since he possesses almost divine alchemical abilities. Thor surprises her, stating that he has also been living the same way, and apologizes, leaving Lukier shocked by his revelation. Thor reveals the truth, saying that he did not go to the Demon King's territory as a guest, but rather as a hostage, or rather, a sacrifice. He explains that, to his father, he was nothing but a shame to the Duke's family, and therefore he was sent to die. Lukier is shocked to hear his confession. Thor explains that in the Empire, only strength had value, and because he had no talent for fighting, he was considered useless. Alchemy, which he liked so much, was seen as child's play. But since he arrived there, he felt lucky because he finally managed to work as an alchemist. He says that now he understands the joy of creating items and seeing them used, while Lukier reacts in surprise. Mabel asks if it is true that Thor was sent by the Empire as a hostage and sacrifice. He confirms it, but she does not understand why he revealed that. Mabel comments that it would have been better to let everyone think he was just an envoy from the Empire, because with their support he could have asked for anything. Then she questions Thor's reason for telling the truth. Thor explains with a smile that Mabel is right, which is why he asks her to keep that a secret. He says that if they found out he was sent as a sacrifice, the way they treated him would change. Besides, the Empire's reputation could worsen, so he prefers to keep it hidden. In exchange, he promises not to reveal the Demon King's secret. Lukier is surprised, while Mabel understands his intention. Thor thinks that by protecting Lukier's secret, she will also protect his, creating a relationship of trust. He realizes that both of them understood his intention. He reflects that the Demon King Lukier, behind the clothes and the mask, is just a small girl who does not believe in herself. He feels that this situation overlaps with his in the Empire, when he also needed to hide who he really was. Lukier starts laughing loudly, finding it absurd that Thor revealed his secret in exchange for protecting hers. She says it is a ridiculous exchange of secrets and, blushing and irritated, asks what he is thinking by doing something like that. Thor complains that Lukier is mean for laughing too much, but she retorts that the cruel one was him, for revealing his own identity. Even so, Lukier admits that, with his sincere way of acting, she has no choice but to believe him. Thor asks if Lukier will really trust him. She answers yes. After all, he revealed his secrets and showed trust first. Lukier states that if she doubted someone like that, she would have no right to rule others. Then she orders Mabel to keep everything a secret. Thor smiles and praises her, saying she is an excellent demon king, making Lukier blush and complain that he is always complimenting her like that. Lukier stands before everyone in the castle, declaring that Thor Regis is a precious guest of the Empire and also an alchemist under her direct supervision. She orders that no one treat him differently from now on. Thor watches emotionally, while Mabel answers excitedly and respectfully, "Yes, Your Majesty." Lukier explains that her identity and Thor's only need to be kept secret outside that place, but inside there is no need to hide anything. Thor understands and thinks that that space functions as a barrier, a refuge where the Demon King can be without a mask. Mabel confirms excitedly, saying that is exactly it. Mabel suggests that place could be used for quieter meetings, like tea parties, since there Lukier can speak freely with Thor. Excited, she says it would be fun, and Thor agrees with a smile. He offers to prepare something for both of them, while Mabel says she only wishes for Thor and Her Majesty to enjoy themselves together and eat delicious foods. Lukier, a little embarrassed, accepts the idea and says that place will be used for tea gatherings. She thanks Thor, calling him her alchemist, and the three are happy together. The place then comes to be known as the Kingdom's Tea Time. Meanwhile, it is narrated that around that time, the Demon King's territory was beginning to advance gradually, something that no one there yet knew. Thor asks what Mabel was thinking, and she answers that she was remembering earlier. She comments that it was the first time she saw Lukier laugh like that. She explains that Lukier was always raised as the next Demon King from a young age, and that the former Demon King, despite being strong, was also quite severe with her. The former Demon King was able to face several demonic beasts at the same time and wanted Lukier to reach that same level of power. Thor recalls his own home, saying that his father also wanted him to have the same combat ability and trained him harshly without any mercy. He remembers that many times he thought he would die, until he had no choice but to leave the Duke's house. Thor asks if Her Majesty is not strong, and Mabel confirms, saying that when it comes to magic, no one can match Lukier. Thor asks why Her Majesty hides her appearance, and Mabel explains that within the Demon King's territory, there are people who judge by physical strength and would see her as weak. Then she comments that there are always people like that everywhere, but highlights that among them there is someone dangerous, the Flame General Ryazenga, a muscular man nearly 2 meters tall, with red hair like fire, capable capable of spitting flames when angry and famous for his martial arts. Thor comments that he never met Ryazenga, but he sounds frightening, recalling that it was his family who protected the Flame Mountain Fortress in the famous seven-day battle against the heroes. Mabel explains that Ryazenga is a descendant of the same Ifrit who guarded the fortress, which is why his bloodline is respected for its strength. However, she also emphasizes that not everyone in his clan is obsessed with power. Some are kind. Mabel sets a plan to show Thor the castle the next day, and he accepts. At night, while they walk through the moonlit corridors, Thor thanks Mabel for the day. Mabel asks Thor to stop using formalities with her, but he insists that she takes very good care of him. She says there's no need for that, explaining that she was ordered to treat him as a special guest, with status equivalent to that of a chancellor or minister of the kingdom. Mabel asks Thor to speak to her normally. He agrees, saying he will be under her care. Right after, Mabel holds his hand and asks him to stay there forever. Blushing, Mabel says she would like to be by Thor's side forever. Surprised, he calls out to her, but she quickly embarrassed, bids him good night before running off. Thor, still with his heart racing from Mabel's words, thinks about everything that happened since he arrived there. He managed to create magical items, found a book from another world, and lived remarkable experiences. Looking at the moon, he admits he feels satisfied and thinks that maybe he should follow what Mabel said and stay forever in the Demon King's territory. Thor decides that he has no intention of returning to the Empire. He thinks that, as an alchemist, he should make life in the Demon King's territory more convenient and useful. Under the full moon, he thinks that he will do this for Mabel, Lukier, and everyone who welcomed him there. A subordinate enters the throne room after being summoned. He apologizes for disturbing so late, but says that he has something urgent and important to report. The subordinate explains that he managed to observe Thor creating items and began to understand him better. Her Majesty asks if it is related to Regis, but he says no. He also confirms it is not something from the gods of health, nor a dimensional item like Mabel's accessory. The subordinate explains that the item created by Thor was a dimensional storage box used by heroes to store infinite objects in another dimension. Upon realizing this, he panics and reacts exaggeratedly, screaming in shock at the revelation. The Demon King is startled by the scream, while Regis nervously explains that the storage box is different from other magics because it allows items to be stored in a separate space. He recalls that the heroes from another world used it to materialize large amounts of objects from nothing, which was one of the reasons they were so powerful, and a threat to the demons of that time. It is explained that the heroes were so dangerous because they could pull out weapons and potions from nowhere, thanks to the storage box, which even gave rise to a saying in the demon territory. When you encounter a hero, expect 100 items to appear. The Demon King comments that if everyone had this ability, the demons would already have been wiped out, and recalls that not all heroes possessed such a rare power. Regis, impressed, thinks that Thor managed to recreate exactly this same legendary box. Kelv, in panic, warns that it is serious for Thor Regis to monopolize the storage box and insists that this must not happen under any circumstances. The Demon King, however, calms him, saying there is no need to worry, because Thor already promised to create one for Mabel and another for him. Kelv, shaken, thinks that the very concept of rare items in the world is disappearing upon seeing that Thor can create the same storage box used by the heroes. He is surprised to hear that Thor will make more of them for Mabel and for the king. The king then reassures him, asking him to remain calm, and admits that he too was to blame for making him lose control. Kelv conveys Thor's message to the king, saying that he wishes to be reasonable and act as an alchemist in the service of the Demon King. Thor also promised to be their ally, words that conveyed sincerity, leaving no choice but to trust him. Kelv comments that Thor even lent his support willingly without complaint, showing that he is reliable. The king agrees, affirming that he is someone they can trust. Kechiruv thinks, saying he never met anyone like Thor, and the king replies that this is exactly his way. The king comments that he cannot take his eyes off Thor, and complains that it is a nuisance. Kechiruv notices that the king is in a good mood, and asks if something happened between him and Thor. Rhaegarys. The king then responds by calling Kelv, leaving him attentive to what would come next. Kechiruv asks if it was just a normal conversation, and the king confirms that it was. He explains that they talk to understand each other beyond their own positions, showing Thor and a young woman shaking hands. The king concludes by saying that was all. The scene shifts. At the same time, Thor was arriving in the Demon King's territory. In the Dulgarian Empire, nobles were attending a party in a guest house in the imperial capital. The scene highlights the luxurious environment and some conversations among the guests. At the party, everyone stirs at the arrival of Vargas Regis, the noblest duke of the empire. The guests comment on his loyalty, saying that he sent his own son as a sacrifice to the Demon King's territory for the good of the empire. Some exalt him, but the question also arises if this does not bring him pain, while he remains silent with a serious expression. The nobles applaud enthusiastically, praising the duke's house as an example and pride of the empire, the model everyone should follow. While the crowd celebrates, Vargas Regis watches silently, thinking to himself, "This is it. This is right. Duke Vargas Regis smiles arrogantly while receiving the applause of the gathered nobility. He thinks with satisfaction that all that praise and recognition are worthy of his family and his position. Duke Vargas, drunk with pride, comments how the prestige of his family will only increase now that the stain has been removed. When a man tries to mention Thor's abilities as an alchemist, the Duke reacts furiously, ordering that name never be spoken again. He insists that Thor only fulfilled his role by dying as a sacrifice, nothing more. Irritated, he orders a servant to bring him a drink immediately. During the party, the nobles get excited with the arrival of an important figure. They comment on her sakura-colored hair and blue eyes, as well as the legendary sword that recognizes her as its owner. Then appears the 30th Queen of the Empire, known as the Sword Princess, Her Highness, Rihanna. The nobles comment on the princess's beauty and power, praising her light magic. The Duke greets her with a cynical smile, but Rihanna immediately notices the presence of an unwelcome guest and orders that he be removed from the place at once. The Duke is shocked to hear the princess's words, his face sweating and overcome with panic, unable to believe what just happened. Duke Vargas Regis is dragged by the guards, outraged and trying to justify himself, saying that he is the Duke and demanding answers. He questions the reason for being expelled, but the princess stares firmly at him and accuses him of putting her and her allies at risk. Indignant, she asks how he still has the nerve to speak that way after everything he did. The princess begins confronting the Duke, reminding him of the request made to the imperial court to repair her magic sword. She explains that after receiving the report that the repairs were finished, she tested the sword, but the blade could not withstand her own mana and shattered. The Duke, in shock, can barely believe what he is hearing. Rihanna continues her accusation, saying that during the fight against a demonic beast, she nearly lost her life because the sword she trusted broke. She reveals that it was her comrades who saved her, fighting with all their strength. Afterward, upon investigating, she discovered that the sword had been crudely repaired, only with common pieces of metal. This blocked the mana flow, leading to the destruction of the blade, and she makes it clear that the house responsible for that repair was, without doubt, the Regis family. The Duke, silent, begins to feel the weight of the accusation. The Duke starts sweating and forces a smile, trying to maintain composure, but the people around are already murmuring indignantly. They comment that the Regis family made a careless repair, that if they couldn't fix the sword, they should have spoken the truth. Others criticize, saying that putting someone at risk in battle this way is unforgivable. Meanwhile, someone observes that all the prestige the family gained with the sacrifice is now unraveling. The Duke, desperate, yells that there is no way that happened, and tries to shift the blame onto the alchemists responsible for repairing the sword. He insists that they were the ones who failed and should be punished. The princess, however, reveals that she sent a messenger specifically to confirm who was in charge of the repair, and as a result, she received an official document proving responsibility. The princess displays the document that bears the Duke's house seal and the butler's signature, proving that the responsibility for the faulty repair of the sword lay entirely with the Regis family. Those around are shocked, while the Duke falls into despair upon seeing the undeniable proof against him. The princess shows the broken sword and explains that the alchemist said how it was only partially repaired, and that the small remaining flaws were what caused its breakage. She highlights that the restored parts resisted her light magic, and even the claws of a demonic beast, proving the problem was the incomplete repair done by House Regis. The princess explains that since her light mana had grown stronger, she decided to use the sword not only in rituals, but also to hunt demonic beasts. She states that she survived thanks to the person who fully repaired the sword, and asks the Duke to reveal who this person was and where they are now, making it clear she wants to make them her ally. The Duke tries to justify himself, saying he does not know who made the first repair, claiming it must have been some wandering alchemist. The princess coldly replies that this is a shame and orders him out, saying she does not want to see his face again. The Duke then leaves the hall nervous and sweating, only to be surprised by someone calling him outside. The Duke explodes in fury, yelling at the butler for having ruined everything. He accuses him of only fixing the sword's appearance and still leaving obvious evidence, blaming him for the disgrace of his name. The butler, desperate, tries to apologize, saying that he only followed instructions, but the Duke, consumed by rage, places him under house arrest, while another man watches the scene in shock. The butler, even after being scolded and dismissed, thinks to himself that there is still a way to fix the situation. He acknowledges that the glory of his house fell because of this accident, but decides that he will prove his worth to the Empire. With determination, he declares he has a plan that will bring advantages and results, showing that there is still merit in his existence. The butler, now alone, thinks about how to restore his fame. He believes that if he manages to manipulate the demons and demihumans properly, not only will he return to his former prestige, but he may also reach an even higher position. The scene then shifts back to the Demon King's territory. Thor asks Mabel to guide him through the place, and she happily accepts. He notices that her hairstyle is different from usual and realizes how excited she is. Then he is informed that Thor's room is on the third floor of the west building, while the maids stay on the first floor and can be called whenever necessary. Mabel guides Thor through the rooms, showing the kitchen, where they see the chef and other maids working. After that, she takes him through other areas of the castle, enthusiastically presenting the places. In the end, the two walk together, smiling and cheerful from the tour. Mabel shows Thor the main entrance of the castle, explaining that from there it is possible to access all the other places. Thor pays attention and replies excitedly that he understood and will remember the location. Thor looks at the statue of a warrior and asks who she was. Mabel explains that that was the statue of the first Demon King. Surprised, Thor comments that the first Demon King was a woman, and he also asks about the sword the statue is holding. Mabel explains that the first Demon King's sword was forged from a stone that fell from the heavens and used in the fight against heroes from another world, being something very rare. Thor, however, notices that the statue's sword is only a replica since he doesn't feel any mana in it. He comments that he can tell thanks to his alchemy skill. Mabel is impressed and praises his perception. Mabel says that the sword ended up breaking during the war against the heroes and that currently no one knows where it is. She comments that it would be an incredible treasure for Thor-sama to see one day. Thor, however, smiles confidently and says that if the sword were still in the castle, he would very much like to try to repair it, leaving Mabel surprised by his determination. Mabel is startled and reminds Thor that it's the first Demon King's sword, but ends up thinking that with him, maybe it would be possible to restore it. Thor says that, since the sword is missing, he can't do anything, but admits he would like to find it if he had the chance. Then he thinks that perhaps it would be even better to create something that surpasses that legendary sword. Thor comments that he could create a special sword, like one that extends or fires black mana. Mabel gets excited at the idea and asks if he really intends to make a sword for Her Majesty. Thor confirms, saying it would be great for her, and Mabel, thrilled, says that if he needs anything, he just has to ask. Mabel clings to Thor's arm, prompting the guards to comment that she looked very happy. Thor is embarrassed and surprised, but Mabel quickly tries to play it off and says to continue the tour. Meanwhile, someone appears and asks if Thor is the guest from the Empire, and he confirms, still a bit awkward. An imposing knight appears before Thor, looking down on him and saying he seemed quite weak. Thor watches in surprise, feeling the pressure of the warrior's presence. Thor looks in amazement at the man in front of him, noting that he is huge, over 2 meters tall. His straight red hair sways like flames, drawing even more attention. Surprised, Thor thinks to himself, trying to figure out exactly who this person is. Thor is startled to recognize the man and calls him Flame General Raizenga-sama. The man firmly confirms, saying he is Raizenga, one of the generals who serve Her Majesty, known as the Sole Flame General. He explains that he came in person upon hearing there was a visitor from the Empire. With a confident smile, he comments with satisfaction that Thor knows his name. Thor introduces himself politely, saying his name is Thor Regis and that he came from the Dolgarla Empire, asking to be well treated from then on. Raizenga thanks him for the courtesy and comments that he already knew his name, but thought it was wrong that he had come personally just to see his face, something that displeased his daughter. Right after, he decides to introduce her, revealing that his daughter's name is Agnes. However, he quickly sneers, saying he expected a powerful warrior coming from an empire of proud fighters, but that Thor seemed far too frail. Thor calmly admits he is not made for fighting, while Agnes, embarrassed, tries to smooth things over by calling to her father, who keeps insisting that Thor wouldn't be good in real combat. Raizenga keeps provoking, saying he wanted his daughter to duel a true warrior of the Empire, but sees before him only a disappointing weakling. Agnes, irritated, loses control and lets her flames leak out, but her father scolds her to calm down. Then he calls out to Thor Regis, preparing the next step in the situation. Raizenga says he lives in the mountains near the border and has already encountered many from the Empire, wanting to know the name of some strong warrior from there to face. Mabel gets nervous and asks him not to treat Thor so casually, reminding him that Thor is an honored guest and an alchemist under the direct supervision of the Demon King himself. Mabel insists that this is not the place to gather information about the Empire, and reminds him that Thor is an honored guest. Raizenga reflects that the Demon King seeks to understand the human world and that this is a noble idea, but declares that it is necessary to know the Empire's combat strength. He says battles are where his daughter can show her power, while Mabel counters that even a guest should not be treated as someone weak, since the king desires a world of peace. Raizenga glares at Thor intimidatingly and asks what he can really do. Then he questions how someone who doesn't fight could be useful to Her Majesty, making clear his distrust of Thor's value. Thor feels Raizenga's crushing pressure, to the point that his throat burns just from the force emanating from him. He realizes the man is enormous, with arms capable of killing him in a single blow. Mabel tries to intervene, but is restrained. Thor thinks that, depending on the answer he gave, he didn't know what might happen to him. Even so, he thinks he could ease the situation with flattery, but remembers that he left the Empire and swore loyalty to the Demon King, and therefore must live without shame, holding firm to his choice. Thor declares firmly that until the end of his life, he will be an alchemist. He states he can adjust Ryzenga's daughter's armor using his skill. Then he points out that the armor has the earth element, surprising everyone. Ryzenga, irritated and suspicious, questions how someone as weak as Thor could know something about that. Thor explains that, to withstand the Ifrit's fire, the armor needed to have the earth attribute, since rock and iron resist heat, unlike the water attribute, which would turn to steam against fire. He reveals that that armor is a very rare item with a double earth attribute, surprising everyone. Thor then confirms his explanation and challenges the Flame General, who falls silent, while Mabel is impressed with his knowledge, comparing it to that of the first Demon King. Thor points out that the current armor does not resist flames and heat well, and is also loose at the joints. He then offers to reinforce it with his alchemy and asks the Flame General's opinion. Ryzenga reacts furiously, saying that such a matter was none of a human alchemist's business, while Mabel and Agnes watch in silence, surprised by Thor's boldness. Ryzenga gets even angrier and shouts that he would never let a weak alchemist mess with his daughter's clothes. Then he orders Agnes to go back with him. She tries to protest, calling to her father, but is ignored. Thor watches in silence, while Agnes and Mabel show frustration with the situation. The servants and Mabel are impressed by Thor's stance, praising his courage for facing Ryzenga without hesitation. They emphasize that Ryzenga is among the 5 strongest in the Demon King's castle, which makes Thor's boldness even more surprising. Mabel, in shock, recognizes how much courage he truly showed. Thor thinks that it wasn't courage he showed, but rather that he was drawn by interest in the armor. He only wanted the general to see his skills as an alchemist. Despite his curiosity about Ryzenga and his daughter, he decides it's not the right moment to dwell on it. Then he asks to continue the tour, planning to ask Mabel about the matter later. Thor and Mabel happily continue the tour, not imagining that, behind it, General Ryzenga was seething with anger, and that this would still bring consequences. Thor thanks Mabel for the tour of the Demon King's castle, saying it was a great help. He comments that he really likes baths and will probably use the bathhouse a lot. Mabel answers excitedly, saying he can use it as much as he wants, but quickly adds that there is one condition. Thor heads to the bathhouse, remembering Mabel's warning about the in-use sign. He checks the entrance and sees that there is no sign, so he concludes it's free and enters happily, determined to bathe immediately. Thor enters the resting area and notices there's no one around, so he decides to relax and wash off all the sweat. As he looks around, he notices what seems to be Agnes's armor. Right after, he hears a loud noise coming from a salamander kettle, exactly as Mabel had explained during the tour, which surprises him. Thor remembers that salamanders served Ifrit, so it's no surprise that Agnes was around. He decides that, since he is using the bath, he should at least say a few respectful words. Meanwhile, he notices something approaching, catching his attention. Suddenly, a salamander leaps toward Thor, catching him off guard. He dodges instinctively, almost getting hit by the flames. In the middle of the confusion, he lets out a frightened wah and then looks around, confused, not quite understanding what just happened. Thor quickly activates his creation, the super small portable storage, and orders it to absorb the flames. The device sucks in the fire successfully, leaving him relieved and impressed with how it works. He thinks that, despite its small size, the ability is powerful enough to handle those flames. While Thor celebrates, the salamander lets out a scream of despair. Agnes introduces herself, revealing her full name, Agnes Friesad, and notes that this was the second time they had met. Thor replies politely, saying his name Thor Regus. Right after, Agnes bows and apologizes sincerely, saying she is very sorry for what happened earlier. Thor explains that he only went in because he heard that the salamanders took care of heating the baths, and he was curious to take a look, but he didn't expect to find Agnes naked under the armor. Agnes, nervous, tries to justify it, saying it wasn't his fault since she herself had decided to help the salamanders and hadn't put up the in-use sign. Thor then apologizes, saying he felt bad for having seen something so intimate by accident. Thor, embarrassed, tries to explain and ends up complimenting Agnes's beauty, making the situation even more awkward. To change the subject, he comments on Ifrit's blood and how impressive her flames are. Agnes then notes that even her armor, despite being rare, can't withstand the power of her own flames, highlighting the strength she carries. Agnes reveals that she can't control her flames, and that whenever she gets nervous or excited, they leak out of her body. To deal with that, she says she turned to the salamanders, who help and train her, and have been her longtime friends. Thor sees her struggle, and comments that it must have been really hard, while Agnes admits she doesn't think much of her own magical powers. Agnes says that before awakening her flame powers, she could wear any clothes normally, but now they all end up burned. She remembers that she even hurt other people when the flames spread out of control. Sad, She asks if Thor would really do something about it. Thor answers firmly that he will think of a way to help her and will do as much as possible. Agnes asks hopefully if she will be able to wear clothes normally again, and Thor answers confidently that yes, because he is an alchemist in the service of the Demon King. She recalls that General Ryzenga had already questioned how she could be useful to Her Majesty, but admits she doesn't know how her father would react. Worried, she says it's dangerous and that Thor doesn't need to risk himself for her. Thor explains that helping Agnes with her problem would also serve as proof of his usefulness to the Demon King, thus fulfilling what was asked of him. Determined, he directly asks Agnes to accept his help, leaving her surprised and a bit speechless at his firmness. Thor places his hand on his chest and asks Agnes to hire him, assuring her he can help solve the flame problem. Moved, with tears in her eyes, Agnes confides that she wants to be able to wear clothes again and also have friends, revealing her deep loneliness and desire to live like an ordinary person. Agnes bows before Thor and emotional asks for his help, saying she looks forward to working with him. Thor smiles warmly and confidently, showing he is truly willing to help her. Thor creates a magic item and gives it to Agnes, saying that until he finishes something better, she can use that one to contain the flames. He explains it's a smaller version of the hero's storage box, and that she only needs to hold it and think store. Agnes is surprised to receive something so precious, but Thor assures her he can make another, and even asks for her feedback after she uses it. Moved, Agnes thanks him deeply as they walk together through the castle. Thor thinks about Agnes's situation. He remembers that those who inherit Ifrit's blood only manage to control their flames well after turning 20. Until then, as in her case, they can't even wear normal clothes, having to rely on salamanders to play and live. Thinking about this, he concludes that Agnes would still have to face another 5 years until full control, which makes him worried and serious about how to help her. Agnes thinks that a temporary fix wouldn't be enough. She would need something deeper to handle her flames. Meanwhile, Thor researches a book on items from the hero's world, imagining there might be something capable of containing black flames. At that moment, someone watches him and asks if he is looking for something. Thor hurries out with a book in his hands when a maid asks him what happened. He explains that he talked with Agnes and is now trying to create an item that can suppress her flames. The young woman understands and asks that he truly help Agnes, saying it would be important for her as well. The boy asks Mabel if she was friends with the girl, and she confirms, explaining that since she was young, she worked in the Demon King's castle and had many chances to get to know her. She says they used to play together. The boy, surprised, remembers that the castle had skilled healers capable of even making burn marks disappear. The boy finds out that Agnes was the one who caused the burn. Mabel remembers that this happened back when she was Her Majesty's childhood friend. Because of guilt, Agnes distanced herself even from her and never wanted to appear in public again. A woman, moved, understands the situation and decides to start alchemy right away. A pendant is presented as an accessory capable of circulating energy through the body and improving health, even recommended by a famous master. The boy watches, intrigued, realizing that in that world the concept of mana is different, and discovers that the object uses the idea of feng shui. The boy compares the elements of his world with those of the other. He explains that there they have 5 elements: wood, fire, water, earth, and metal, while in his world there are 6: fire, light, darkness, earth, wind, and water. He also notices that they use ki as a version of mana. The pendant would spin among the 5 types of mana to wake up the body and hidden potential, but the conversion system is still not very detailed. The boy analyzes the information and understands that the elements transform in sequence. Wood becomes fire, fire turns to ashes that become earth, and earth ages until it becomes metal. He notes that the pendant is formed by the symbols of the azure dragon, vermilion bird, white tiger, black tortoise, and a keelin in the center. Even without mastering this knowledge, he realizes that changing elements in that world was considered a secret art, and that magic associations would not leave such important information out in the open. The boy explains that the pendant converts elements in a balanced way thanks to the relief of the divine beasts engraved on it, helping regulate the body's mana and improve health. He says this can even awaken people's hidden potential and change their fates. The elf is startled by the idea, but the boy smiles confidently, stating that this will help Agnes control her flames, and decides to start right away. The boy activates his advanced alchemy and creates a 3D diagram to produce the pendant. He notes that the size must be right to be worn in the hand, with soft chains so as not to hurt the skin. The hardest part would be accurately reproducing the engraved patterns of the divine beasts on the pendant. The boy starts modeling the pendant's figures. He decides to use the Garuda bird as the base for the vermilion bird, and notes that tigers exist in this world, which makes creating the white tiger easier. For the azure dragon, he concludes it is likely a true dragon. As for the keelin and the black tortoise, he decides to just trace them as they are, believing it will be fine if they are done correctly. The boy finishes the mold shapes and begins casting the health-boosting pendant, using a metal block as material. He adds the element-changing function inside the artifact. However, he thinks that in this world there are no wood and metal elements, only fire, water, and earth, and he wonders if he will really be able to complete the process. The boy realizes that his supreme alchemy skill, Over Alchemy, can handle the earth, metal, and wood elements. He receives the option to add these attributes along with the knowledge he gained about mana from another world. Determined, he decides not to hesitate and incorporates fire, metal, wood, water, and earth to finish creating the health-boosting pendant. The boy focuses all his energy to shape the pendant with maximum precision, visualizing every detail. He asks Mabel to confirm whether the engraved shapes match the divine beasts. She checks and confirms, listing the dragon, the tortoise, the tiger, and the bird, validating that the work is correct. The boy starts the activation of Over Alchemy, ensuring that mana can be converted between elements, while Mabel confirms that everything matches the book. Determined, he creates the health-boosting pendant, with the goal of letting Agnes convert her flames into other elements, promising himself he will do everything so she never has to cry again. The health-boosting pendant is completed, possessing the attributes of wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. It splits the user's magic power into 5 equal parts, converting it into these elements to strengthen and maintain health. Each element grants a benefit. Wood gives vitality, fire active energy, earth stability, metal solid strength, and water flexibility. The greater the bearer's magic power, the greater the strengthening effects. The item also has unknown resistance and an estimated durability of 100 years or more. The boy finishes the pendant and hopes it can suppress Agnes's flames. He explains that when mana is placed into the artifact, the 5 engraved beast gods allow energy to circulate through the body, strengthening the user's constitution. Mabel then asks whether the same effect could be applied on a large scale, spreading the 5 figures throughout the Demon King's territory. The boy confirms, thinking that the pendant has the power to improve even the condition of an entire country. The boy asks if it would be possible to test the idea on a large scale, but Mabel explains that this would require permission from Her Majesty and all the high officials of the Demon King's territory, which would be very difficult. Even so, he is satisfied to have completed the pendant, and thinks that the next step is to find out if it can really change attributes. If it works for anyone, it could even become standard equipment. Excited, he says he can't wait for the next day. A knight finds another in the castle and says he was looking for him. The older man, who seems to be his father, reminds him that they will return to their territory in 2 days and that he should already be prepared. The younger knight apologizes, explaining that he wanted to explore the castle a bit more. The father forgives him, and he apologizes again for the trouble. The father says he doesn't blame his son, but recognizes the hardships he faces for carrying Ifrit's blood, which makes it hard to control his flames. He explains that the ability to manipulate fire instinctively through emotions is similar to Ifrit himself. The son, downcast, admits he can't do any of that. The father ends by saying he has already delivered his report to Her Majesty, while the son answers in a resigned tone, calling him father. An army marches led by a commander. She explains that they will return to their territory, where they will also begin mining exploration, and that they have authorization to carry out joint operations with the Empire. The knight confirms that the territory is close to the border, and the father stresses the importance of maintaining good relations with the Empire in that region. The father says he visited the guest from the Empire, but was disappointed to find that he was frail and had no combat skills. He laughs, saying he expected to meet a noble strong enough to cross swords, but ended up finding him pathetic. The son, upon hearing this, calls him father in a worried tone, while the man keeps mocking, saying it was a great disappointment. The son, irritated, asks his father to stop badmouthing him, stating that Thor Regis is a good person. He reveals that he met and spoke with him, defending his character. Surprised, the father asks if he really talked to Thor. The son shows his father the box with the gift he received from Thor, explaining that, worried about his struggle to control the flames, Thor gave him that valuable item. Firmly, he asks his father to stop speaking ill of him. The man falls silent for a moment, thinking about his son's words. The father, annoyed, replies that even with that item nothing would change because Agnes still can't control her flames and can only hide behind armor. Agnes tries to argue but is cut off, while the father asks her to understand his position, showing firmness in his words. The father speaks seriously, saying he always thinks of Agnes as good and reveals that the mining project was planned to help her, even writing letters to the Marquis. He explains that if negotiations with the Empire go well, they can develop the mines, but it will be necessary to eliminate creatures that have made them their nest. At that moment, Agnes would have the chance to show everyone how useful her flame magic can be. She, moved, recognizes her father's care. Agnes remembers that, despite people's fear, some still tried to talk to her. Thor wasn't scared of her flames and promised to find a way to help her. She thinks he's strange but understands why Mabel likes to stay by his side, since both are kind and get along well, though she feels she can't get close to the two of them. Agnes thinks that as long as she has her flames, she will always be recognized as her father's daughter and would never do anything to stain his name. The man smiles with satisfaction and says that, until they depart the next day, she is free to do as she wishes. She answers respectfully that she understands. Two men talk about Thor's search for a suitable place for his workshop. They comment that the requirements he wants make it hard to find the right place, since he needs easy access to alchemy materials. Besides that, it would be complicated to open a human's workshop in a busy city, and it's not possible to just go out mining or gathering resources freely. The two discuss that it would be dangerous for Thor to appear before large crowds, since many are not used to humans. One suggests that the ideal would be a location away from the center, with fewer people, but that still meets his needs. They acknowledge the search is difficult but must continue, and conclude that what is missing now is someone who can act as Thor's bodyguard. In the end, the subject shifts to Ryzenga. The commander says she has given orders that Thor is not to be treated rudely. They comment that Ryzenga would be against this, but could do little beyond complaining. They also discuss that punishing him without cause would only make people wary of him. They decide it would be better to create a suitable place outside the city, since forcing him to stay in a hostile environment would only drive away those who might come to him for item creation. Her Majesty entrusts Kelv with the task of finding the ideal location for Thor's workshop, and he accepts the order respectfully. The next day, Thor is greeted by a knight in front of the castle, marking the start of a new step in his journey. Thor arrives and thanks Agnes for being there waiting for him. Surprised, he notices that Mabel is also present, and she explains that she asked to accompany him, believing that as his maid, she could be useful in various situations. Agnes says goodbye to Thor, saying she will return with her father to their territory the next day. She recalls that he had spoken about creating an item to help her control the flames, but believes there won't be time for that. Thor, however, surprises her by stating that the item is already finished. Thor hands the finished pendant to Agnes, saying it will help her control her flames. He explains that by channeling her fire into the item, the magic will transform into other elements, making her flames much weaker. In addition, the artifact will reinforce her body, giving her earth-like toughness, water's flexibility, metal's firmness, and wood's vigor. Mabel appears with prepared clothing to help test the health-boosting pendant. She asks Agnes to take off the armor and put on the clothes, but Agnes panics, fearing she'll burn it and end up hurting her again. Agnes hesitates in fear, but Mabel reassures her that there are no flaws in the items Thor creates. He then guarantees that if anything goes wrong, he will adjust the pendant on the spot. With a smile, Thor says that as long as she wants it, he will keep recreating and making magic items to help her, because that's what he truly wants to do. Agnes thinks about Thor, realizing that he always manages to calm the insecurities in her heart. She understands that if she left without even trying, she would deeply regret it. Decided, she thinks she's more afraid of giving up now than of facing the risk. Thor waits seated, while some animals sleep peacefully at his side. Agnes appears, hesitant, but decides to come in and, a little nervous, tells him she made him wait. Thor watches her closely as he sees her arrive. Agnes appears wearing maid clothes and, embarrassed, says she can't calm down, since it had been a long time since she wore anything other than her armor. Insecure, she asks Thor if she looks strange. Thor smiles and says excitedly that she looks incredibly cute. Blushing even more, Agnes panics and denies it, not knowing how to react to the compliment. Agnes's necklace begins to shine intensely. It converts the excess of her fire magic into other elements, like wood, earth, metal, and water, balancing her power. Impressed, Agnes watches in surprise the immediate effect of the strengthening pendant on her chest. The pendant fully activates its effects, converting Agnes's fire magic into other elements and strengthening her body and mind. She feels her skin become bright and smooth, while she receives attributes such as stability, firmness, flexibility, and vitality. Surprised, she realizes how amazing the item really is. Agnes feels her body incredibly light after activating the pendant. Excited, she spins to test the sensation. Right after, some monsters appear, but she gets ready to face them with renewed confidence. Thor explains that Agnes is now using all her fire magic to strengthen her body, so she won't need to worry about burning clothes anymore, though it will take some time to get used to it. However, in the middle of the situation, Agnes panics, shouting when she realizes she isn't wearing any panties. Leaving everyone shocked, Agnes ends up falling into an awkward position and, embarrassed, tries to play it off with a wink. Thor and the others blush, and she quickly says it's fine and not to worry, while Thor tries to justify himself, saying he didn't see anything and apologizing. Thor explains that thanks to the fire attribute, Agnes gained extra vitality and her magic was converted into other elements, strengthening body and mind. She, however, is visibly embarrassed and comments that this becomes obvious when she activates the power. Thor apologizes for the unintentional function, but soon says excitedly that the experiment was a success and that the health-boosting necklace worked perfectly. Agnes's necklace converts fire magic into other elements, increasing stability, firmness, flexibility, and vitality by plus 150%. She is embarrassed because her reaction is very obvious when she activates the power. Thor apologizes for the unintentional function, but soon states with satisfaction that the experiment was a success and that the health-boosting necklace works perfectly. Mabel thanks Thor-sama emotionally, saying that with this her wish has been fulfilled. Agnes calls out to her in surprise, and Mabel, without hesitation, steps forward and suddenly hugs her, apologizing as she wraps her in her arms. Agnes fears that her flames will get out of control, but Mabel holds her tightly, saying it's okay. She admits that she was probably responsible for Agnes's trauma of burning someone and apologizes. Agnes, moved, tries to deny it but cannot hide how much it affected her. Crying, Agnes says the fault for the incident when they were children is hers, since she lost control upon awakening her powers and ended up causing the accident. She apologizes. Meanwhile, Mabel thinks that at the time, Agnes apologized countless times, but if she herself hadn't been so shaken by it, maybe Agnes would have more confidence in her abilities and flame magic. Agnes cries, saying it was her fault, but Mabel holds her firmly and says it isn't her fault and that it's already in the past, assuring her she won't hurt anyone anymore. Mabel shows that now Agnes can lean on her, and, emotional, Agnes accepts, crying in her arms. Agnes breaks down in tears, letting out all the pent-up emotion. Soon after, still moved, she and Mabel exchange a few words. Mabel then puts something around her neck, while Thor watches from afar and comments, "All right then." Still holding Agnes, Mabel looks at Thor and says it's his turn now. She suggests that Thor give Agnes a hug as well. Thor is surprised by the request, while Agnes, completely flushed and nervous, reacts in shock, asking why it would have to be him. Embarrassed, Agnes thinks Thor probably doesn't like that kind of thing. Mabel insists, saying that now that he can have contact with other people, he should take the chance. Then, smiling mischievously, she asks if Thor hates the idea of hugging Agnes. Thor, embarrassed but firm, answers that he doesn't. While noting that the question was very unfair, Thor and Agnes stand face to face, both nervous and with arms open, about to hug. Their hearts race. Thor thinks that hugging her like that is awkward, and ends up remembering that she isn't wearing anything under those clothes, which makes him even more flustered. At that moment, he calls her name out loud, overcome with tension. A sturdy man runs through the corridors calling for Agnes, asking where she went. He realizes he is in the bathhouse and thinks the salamanders there would know her whereabouts. When he finds her, he breaks into a big, joyful smile, exclaiming that he finally found her, calling her my daughter. The man enters the room and sees Agnes about to hug Thor. Shocked, he lets out a cry of surprise. Then he stares at Thor seriously and asks what he thinks he's doing. Thor, sweating nervously, tries to explain that a lot was happening at that moment. Ryzenga, overcome with fury, glares at Thor with an intimidating presence and shouts, asking what he was doing with his daughter. Agnes, desperate to prevent a conflict, steps between them and asks Ryzenga to wait and listen to her. Furious, Ryzenga tells Mabel to get out of the way, but she refuses and shouts that Thor is her master and was still helping Agnes. Agnes, surprised, calls to her father. Ignoring them, Ryzenga extends a threatening hand and declares that he will drag Thor to his territory to make him pay for the sin of touching his daughter. Thor tries to argue and asks Ryzenga to at least hear him out, but the general, consumed by rage, threatens to rip out his mouth if he says another word. Suddenly, Ryzenga charges at high speed, so fast that not even Mabel can react, putting Thor in danger. Mabel explains that General Ryzenga is a very devoted father, but also an incredibly strong warrior. He is so legendary that, on the battlefield, he once cut through a horde of 100 soldiers with his flaming spear. The scene then shows Ryzenga himself, remembered as that legendary warrior whose arm carried devastating strength. General Ryzenga lunges with a powerful blow, kicking up dust and debris with the force of his arm. Thor is frightened by the charge, clearly sensing the devastating impact of the attack coming his way. Agnes steps in front and blocks the attack firmly. Her serious gaze shows determination, as the impact of the blow is contained by her strength, scattering debris around. Agnes faces her father firmly and asks him to listen to what Thor has to say. The general's attack is interrupted by her, surprising Thor, who watches her, impressed. The general cries out in alarm at the sight of his daughter, calling out to Agnes. Meanwhile, a sequence of magical effects begins to occur. The fire attribute grants her increased vitality, and the excess magic is converted into other elements: fire into earth, earth into metal, metal into water, and water into wood, each one boosting her attributes by plus 250%. Agnes appears wreathed in magical flames, looking seriously at her father. The general, surprised and unable to move, thinks he can't break free. He asks what happened to her, shocked by the transformation and the power she shows. The general, frightened, asks what Agnes really is, shocked that she broke free. She appears wrapped in flaming energy, her eyes shining with power as the system describes her abilities. The fire attribute grants her plus 250% vitality, and the excess energy is converted into other types of magic: fire into earth, earth into metal, metal into water, and water into wood, each transformation increasing strength, stability, flexibility, and life. Thor explains that he gave his all for Agnes. The general, surprised, realizes that she is not wearing any armor, just normal clothes. Thanks to Thor, Agnes can now fight wearing ordinary clothing, while magical energy shines intensely across her body, leaving everyone shocked. Thor tries to explain that, as an alchemist, he analyzed Agnes's situation and created a solution so she could wear normal clothes. However, the general misinterprets it, believing he merely tricked Agnes to see her clothes burn and leave her naked. Furious, he calls him a pervert and loses his patience, ready to attack him. Overcome by rage, the general summons his great power and unleashes enormous flames, declaring that this is the flame of the Flame General. He warns that if Thor fears this power, he should stay quiet and listen. Meanwhile, Thor watches the scene in surprise. The general is stunned to realize that his flames have disappeared and asks, terrified, what Thor really is. With a steady look, Thor introduces himself, saying he is the alchemist who serves under the Demon Lord's command. Thor calmly explains that his goal is to solve the magical problems that afflict the people of the demon realm so they can live better. He says he merely thought of a way to correct Agnes's magical problem, and understands if they don't believe him. Even so, he asks to be heard. Meanwhile, the general strains, struggling to hold something inside himself, until someone in the background calls out to Lord Rezenga. Furious, the general shouts that Thor is coming with him immediately, and that talking can wait. He moves to grab him, but Agnes steps in front and stops him, surprising the man with her unexpected strength. Thor watches the scene, ready to react. Agnes holds the general firmly, stopping his advances. The man struggles to break free, shouting that he's doing it for her, but Agnes meets his gaze, determined, and tells him to listen, forcefully telling him to leave Thor alone. Shocked, the general thinks that if this continues, he'll have to use all his power. The general unleashes a crushing force, cracking the ground around him as his flame intensifies. Facing him, Agnes stands her ground, staring straight at him without retreating, determined not to let him advance. The general's power increases terrifyingly, leaving even Thor and the other girl stunned. His body swells further, muscles bulge, and the flame on his head flares intensely. He shouts in disbelief, asking how Agnes gained so much power. The general is startled to realize Agnes's flames are tied to her intense emotions. Thor explains that thanks to him, Agnes managed to grow and evolve, and is now channeling all the overflowing magic power caused by her fury. Thor explains that Agnes channeled all her vital energy into the pendant, multiplying her power several times over. That gave her enough strength to halt Shogun Reizenga's movements. Determined, Agnes declares that now, with the power received from Thor, she can protect the people important to her, unlike before when her flames only caused destruction. Agnes remembers Thor Rigas's words, that by invoking the name of the flame, she would be able to use that power to help people. Agnes releases her flame power, recalling Thor Rigas's words that by invoking the name of the flame she could help people. In that moment, she receives a 400% increase to her vitality for being a fire-type user, shocking her enemy. Agnes unleashes her flames with absolute power, while the enemy, in shock, cries out that such words are impossible. Thanks to her fire attribute, she receives a massive boost to her vitality. Agnes holds the enemy aloft and forces him to apologize to Thor. Desperate, he swears in his own name and begs to be released. Meanwhile, others remark that although tales of heroes lifting dragons sound hard to believe, Agnes was truly showing something similar right before their eyes. The group comments that, for Agnes's sake, Thor created an item capable of suppressing her flames. Defeated and exhausted, the enemy watches the situation as she holds the shining object. Agnes shows the Pendant of Vitality, an item created to suppress her fire magic and convert it into other types of magic. Thanks to it, she can now wear ordinary clothes like Mabel. The Shogun looks on, shocked, while Thor confirms the explanation. Emotional, Agnes thanks the item that allowed her to realize the dream of wearing pretty clothes. She then questions the Shogun about what he did to Lord Thor when she asked to make that dream come true, leaving the man sweating and confused without knowing how to answer. In tears, the shogun kneels and apologizes for having acted so rudely toward someone who only wanted to help Agnes. He acknowledges that Thor is a good person for having gone so far to support her, something he himself wished for. Thor watches in surprise, realizing the man is crying for his daughter's sake. The shogun reflects, moved, that Thor wasn't afraid of being hurt and still helped Agnes, something he himself failed to see. He admits his eyes were blind and he didn't know how to judge people for real, despite the grand title he bore. In despair, he decides he will destroy his own useless eyes, while Agnes calls out to him in a panic, trying to stop him. Thor takes the shogun's hands and tells him to stop, saying destroying his own eyes would be going too far. He says he'll be staying in the demon's territory from now on, so he doesn't want to have to worry about something so senseless. Moved, the shogun understands his words and admits he sees that every time he looks at Thor's face. The shogun asks Thor to include him in his plans with Agnes, saying that otherwise he would feel terrible. He also insists on paying for the item Thor made for her, asking only to be told the price. Thor thinks for a moment, and, faced with the proposal, considers how to answer. Thor explains that Agnes's condition improves when she bursts into flames, and that if she's wearing clothes at those times, it's understandable she'd feel uncomfortable. The shogun is moved, recognizing Thor as a good man. Unlike his own cruel father, he admits his mistakes, promises to follow Thor's advice, and asks that they be reported to the Demon King. Thor replies that as long as he builds a normal relationship with Agnes, that will be enough. At that moment, Thor notices something strange in himself and wonders, could this be jealousy? The general kneels before the throne, requesting an unusual audience with the Demon King. Meanwhile, others comment that he values physical strength more, and that perhaps because of that he was looked down on in his youth. Before the Demon King Lucia Evergard, the general declares his wish to secure the loyalty of a certain man. The Flame General, Raizenga, kneels before the Demon King and swears absolute loyalty. He promises to serve faithfully, and if he fails, to give his own life as proof. With fervor, he declares his vow in the name of the Origin of Flame. One of the advisors explains that the oath made in the name of the Origin of Flame is very serious. It is an absolute promise tied to the blood of the Flame Giant, last used in the reign of the first Demon King. They ask if Raizenga understands the weight of his own words, while another marvels at why he made such a sudden vow. Raizenga admits his stupidity, saying he was rude to Thor, who was actually under Her Majesty's direct orders. He explains that Thor cured Agnes's illness, something that had only been contained thanks to the fire armor he created. The Demon King and others are shocked to hear this, surprised at the gravity of the situation. Raizenga explains that by mistake he thought Thor was deceiving Agnes and tried to threaten him with fire, taking him to his territory. However, he admits he was blinded by rage, and it was Agnes herself who corrected his error. He says Thor gave her a special item for which she was grateful, and that instead of losing strength, her fire magic greatly increased her physical power. The Demon King is surprised to hear that Agnes managed to stop the general himself. Raizenga says he was astonished when Agnes stopped him with just one hand and then lifted him with both arms, showing her new strength. The Demon King reflects that Thor not only won Raizenga's loyalty, but also strengthened Agnes's constitution. Even so, he thinks to himself that Thor is a very suspicious man. Raizenga admits that at first he doubted the Demon Kingdom's policy of learning from humans, but upon seeing Thor and what he did for Agnes, he understood it was the right path. Grateful, he declares total fealty to the Demon King and asks to be punished for his mistakes, leaving the king surprised by the sudden display. Raizenga slams himself against the wall in repentance, shouting. Others comment that since Thor arrived, headbutting walls has become a habit. He explains they are using the old ancestral fire to physically strengthen their bodies, something even he hadn't imagined was so powerful. The Demon King watches and quips, calling it Raizenga's blunder. The Demon King reflects that even if it was a misunderstanding, Raizenga must be punished, as it is unforgivable. He compares it to Thor, who had only tried to deceive them before, but now the situation is different. He then asks what punishment Thor wished for him. Raizenga says he asked Thor to punish him at all costs, but Thor wished for nothing, and simply forgave him. Thor asks for alchemy materials and permission to gather resources in the general's territory, suggesting that this also serve as payment and punishment. He also asks to be introduced to the people of the area, as he wishes to become someone accessible to everyone in the future. The Demon King observes his attitude and acknowledges Thor. The Demon King realizes Thor was thinking of the territory and the position of the general's daughter. Thor didn't care about being punished, but wanted to avoid staining the girl's reputation. For that reason, he did not want the general to be punished directly, instead suggesting another kind of penalty. Demon King Lucia declares that even as a misunderstanding, it was unforgivable for Raizenga to threaten Thor and try to take him to his territory. As punishment, he decides to take part of the general's lands, specifically the region near the mines where valuable materials are found. The Demon King orders that a large house and an atelier be built for Thor, using materials from Raizenga's territory. The general accepts the punishment gladly, while Lucia laughs loudly at the situation. The princess, for her part, smiles, finding it amusing how everything turned out, and is happy at the idea of Thor finally having his own space outside the Demon King's castle. Ryzenga's territory is described as mountainous, full of nature, mines, and good materials, and safe because there aren't many people. Thor comes under his protection, ensuring his safety. The Demon King asks Kelvo for his opinion, and he comments that Ryzenga is in negotiations with the Empire. If he were punished severely, it could cause discord with other territories, so he concludes the king's judgment was best. It's shown that in general Ryzenga's territory, mining is being developed, but first they need to subdue the demonic beasts in the mountain. However, because the area is near the Empire's border, gathering soldiers could arouse suspicion. For that reason, Ryzenga negotiates directly with the Empire's marquis to avoid misunderstandings that could look like an invasion. Negotiations between the Empire and the Demon King's territory advance to subdue the demonic beasts of the mountain. However, distrust remains, since the Empire is the very country that exiled Thor, raising doubts about its reliability. The next day, Agnes and General Ryzenga return to their territory. The general promises to prepare a workshop and a house for Thor in his domain as a form of apology for what happened. Thor asks if he could visit Agnes later, and Ryzenga agrees. Agnes, excited, says she's looking forward to it, but ends up embarrassed at being seen in simple clothes in public. Thor bids farewell to Agnes and the general, returning to his room to continue studying alchemy. Before leaving, Agnes gives him a mysterious stone she used as a talisman, explaining that it doesn't melt even at high temperatures. Thor realizes it may be a very rare mineral, possibly even an iron meteorite, and accepts the gift as material for his experiment. Thor examines the rare stone and notices it doesn't change even under high temperatures, believing it fell near the mine. Confident it will be useful, he assesses it and thinks of using it to create powerful weapons capable of killing monsters. This last page shows only a promotional call from the reading site, indicating to continue the story in chapters 10.1 and 10.2 on mangatak.com. It's not part of the manga's narrative, it's just a notice of where to read the next chapters. In the Demon King's territory, in the mining area, enormous spiders appear in the darkness. They advance, devouring their prey and cocooning others in webs. A group of mercenaries walks through the forest, led by an imposing man. One of them comments on the dangerous beasts and the presence of the Flame General in the area. The leader, ignoring the risks, shouts for everyone to do their job, saying the Demon King's territory is full of treasures not even Demihumans can comprehend. The mercenary leader, confident, says he'll cut any enemy in half if one appears. His men laugh excitedly, praising his strength. Right after, he's surprised by something fast that hits him, leaving everyone shocked as they comment on the chief's skill. One of the men is grabbed by the creatures and starts screaming in despair. Soon after, he is brutally torn apart, splattering blood everywhere. Giant spiders attack the men, throwing everyone into panic. Some begin to scream in terror and try to flee desperately. Meanwhile, others notice a huge shadow approaching and wonder what that giant object could be. A gigantic creature appears, with huge legs covered in flames, crushing the ground and revealing its terrifying presence before the forest. The creature stomps hard, crushing several men at once. Spiders keep advancing through the area, while elsewhere a man watches from afar, holding a flame in his hand and looking toward the castle on the horizon. The young man looks at the stone he received from Agnes, realizing it's the first time he's seen a spatial element. He understands it's a meteorite, a stone fallen from space, different from Earth's common elements, composed of air, darkness, and earth. He reflects that if it's properly evaluated, it can awaken spatial attributes and even add new elements to the object created. The young man reflects that since arriving in the Demon King's territory, he has been able to use more and more elements. He thanks Her Majesty for giving him materials and a place to live. Besides the 5 elements of the other world, water, fire, earth, metal, and wood, there are also spatial elements. Then, as he walks, he thinks he still has time until the next task, and remembers the king mentioned having something to show him. Thor was walking through the castle, and was surprised upon entering a hall full of treasures. Delighted by the number of valuable items, he curiously examined various pieces until his eyes stopped on a sword. He recognized it immediately. It was identical to the one depicted in the statue of the first Demon King. Intrigued, he approached to analyze it more closely, realizing it wasn't just an ordinary sword, but a magic sword. While he pondered this, someone outside called out to him, asking if Her Majesty the Demon King was present. The young woman appears before Thor, wearing an elegant dress, asking what he thinks. She says she intends to wear it to the next party. Thor, surprised and charmed, smiles and praises that the outfit suits her very well, addressing her as Her Majesty the Demon King. Lucia appears pleased with the compliment, but asks Thor not to call her Your Majesty, saying that among friends she doesn't like that title. She reminds him that she shared a secret with him and therefore expects to be treated more closely. With a mischievous smile, she orders him to call her only Lucia if he truly considers her a friend. Thor is surprised by the order, and she adds that, as a demon king, it's natural to act selfishly sometimes. Thor suggests it would be better to keep it secret until the party, but agrees when Lucia insists. He calls her Lucia-sama, showing obedience, which leaves her embarrassed. Blushing, Lucia tries to justify that she only wanted to know if the Lord would approve, but ends up flaring up, unable to stand the formality. Thor watches her, and surprised, thinks how cute she is. Lucia asks what Thor was doing, and he replies he was cleaning the atelier. In the process, he found a strange sword and asks if Lucia knows what it is. He notes it isn't the same size as the one on the first Demon King's statue. Then Lucia throws the question back, asking Thor's opinion on what the sword really is. Thor analyzes the sword, saying the material is iron and that it only has strength as an additional factor, likely being just a prototype. He concludes that someone tried to recreate the lost magic sword, but as it didn't resemble the original, it was abandoned. Lucia praises him, saying he's right. Thor then shows that the blade is crushed and doesn't cut, calling it a faulty product. Lucia explains that in her grandfather's time there was a plan to revive the magic sword, created jointly by an elf and a dwarf, but that the additional strength was the prototype's limit. Thor asks if he can keep the sword as evidence, and Lucia replies there was no reason to ask, since that was his atelier. Lucia formally hands the sword to Thor, who thanks her respectfully. Soon after, he asks if he could create a true magic sword using that replica as a base. Intrigued, Lucia tosses the question back, wanting to know his opinion. Thor reveals he dreams of creating a sword that surpasses the Empire's sacred swords, but admits that, since he lacks combat skills, it would be a waste to use it for himself. He then explains that he heard from the general about Lucia's plans against the beasts, and therefore wants to forge a great magic sword for her to use in that battle. Lucia listens attentively and says she understands. Lucia thanks Thor for his wish to create a magic sword, saying that makes her happy. However, she explains that she doesn't need a magic sword to defeat the beasts this time. What they really need is something that can attack from afar, support items in combat, not weapons anyone could use. Thor understands and grows thoughtful, while Kelve is left speechless at her decision. Thor takes in Lucia's words, and excited says he understands and will see if he can create something like that. Smiling, Lucia comments that he truly isn't busy. Right after, Thor rushes out in a hurry, excusing himself with great enthusiasm. A book explains that demonic beasts can't communicate and attack humans, demihumans, and demons, existing in many forms such as beasts, giant insects, and lizards. Thor studies the material and reflects that, though he's sad he can't make a sword for Lucia, he needs to focus on the items required to defeat those creatures. When asked what he plans to do now, he replies not to get carried away with other things. Thor chooses what he intends to craft and points it out in the book. The girl looks on and finds the described object strange, a shiny black cylinder with a transparent blade attached to the tip, unable to fully grasp the letters describing the item. Thor explains he will create a special tool to defeat the demonic beast and asks for Mabel's help, which she happily accepts. He begins planning. First, he needs a light magic stone to emit brightness, and also a darkness magic stone to control the direction of light, making it follow a single path. Determined, he activates his ability, saying, "Super Alchemy." Thor continues his work, adding the wind element to help carry the light even farther. He focuses to the utmost, since if he relaxes, the image disappears. Enveloping the light with darkness and directing it in a straight line, he creates a continuous beam that extends and reaches everywhere, forming a strong trail of light that's easy to hit. Thor activates his super alchemy again and gives shape to the item he planned. The result is a laser pointer, created with the elements of light, darkness, and wind, rated with 4 stars of rarity. The description explains that the light is compressed and forced to follow a straight line by magic power, while darkness wraps it to keep the beam directed, and wind helps the flow of magic power. The item requires a light magic stone and a darkness magic stone, which must be replaced every 3 months. The laser has high resistance, only destroyable by weapons with magic, and it cannot be used against humans, demons, or demi-humans. Its durability is 15 years, with 1 year of support included. Thor finishes his creation and celebrates excitedly, showing the completed item, the laser pointer of the brave world. Mabel looks on in surprise and asks what kind of ability that item has, still confused by the name laser pointer. Soon after, she takes the catalog and confirms whether she can better view the information using the translation memo. The catalog describes the laser pointer as an essential item for presentations, recommended for teachers, capable of conveying instructions precisely, and even scaring off annoying creatures. Mabel reads the description aloud, while Thor admits he doesn't know what a presentation is, but says it seems like an amazing article. Mabel asks what the item's description means, while Thor interprets it as referring to instructions being conveyed clearly on the battlefield. He explains the commander must point out the correct enemy to attack, concluding that this ensures the enemy will fall quickly and silently. They analyze the item's description and conclude that, since it must not be used on humans, it was made to defeat demonic beasts. Mabel understands that the part about competition means heroes competed to see who defeated more creatures, tying that to the term presentation. Thor praises Mabel for understanding, and she says it was thanks to his help. They remark that a hero defeated a powerful beast from afar in just 1 second. Thor concludes the item must have been created solely to defeat demonic beasts, since there are no records of use against demons or demihumans, and explains that if you can hit even the other side of the mountain, the beasts wouldn't dare approach. They realize the annoying creature mentioned is the same bird beast, seen as a symbol of fear. Thor reflects that the laser pointer, capable of extending the reach of magic, is powerful enough to change the course of a war, something terrifying in a world of heroes. A grim image shows the idea of a terrifying presentation while Thor and Mabel get ready together. Then they decide to test the laser pointer, saying it's perfect for dealing with the beasts. Thor and Mabel discuss how to fight the demonic beasts, with him asking her to guard the rear. Meanwhile, minotaurs and elves bicker among themselves, saying the followers of the demonic beast Gargogosa are far too many. The scene reveals that Gargogosa is a giant spider accompanied by several smaller monsters, making the fight even harder. It's shown that the demonic beast Gargogosa, a giant spider, is never truly alone, as it always draws swarms of lesser monsters. The minotaurs act as the vanguard, pretending to attack directly, while the elves stay behind to provide long-range support. However, the problem is that when the front line approaches the beast, the smaller monsters end up focusing on the support, putting the elves in danger even from a distance. Thor watches the situation with Mabel, taking in the explanation. An instructor explains that the training consists of hitting the circle in the center of the target. Thor holds the laser pointer and, with determination, says he wants to see if the effective range improves using the device. He then declares confidently, "Let's try it." Thor points the laser pointer at the target, making a red dot appear in the center. He asks Mabel to cast her magic focusing on that light. She understands and fires her spell, shouting "Icicle Arrow," hitting the target precisely. Mabel is confused because she doesn't understand how she hit, but she celebrates having struck the mark. Thor praises her, impressed, and suggests testing from farther away. They try again and achieve a perfect hit at a distance, 1.5 times greater than normal, even managing to double the range. The Minotaur insists that elves must stay in the rear during battles, but the elf retorts that casting spells requires the perfect distance, and that it's not that simple since magic has limited range. As they argue, another group watches from afar, commenting that someone seems to be practicing spells. The elf notices something strange approaching quickly. Suddenly, the target is struck hard in the center, destroying part of it, while one of the observers is shocked by the precise, powerful impact. Thor confirms that the spell's range was increased by at least 3.5 times, using the entire training field. He concludes the experiment was a success, while Mabel, surprised, asks how it's possible to hit the target even beyond the magic's normal limit. Thor realizes that all the spells had been hitting exactly the same spot from the start. He suspects the spell is being drawn to the magic flow left by the laser pointer. He then concludes that the laser creates a magical connection between itself and the target, linking the spell directly to the illuminated point, which explains the extreme accuracy. The spell is guided by the magic flow created by the laser pointer, showing immense power. The elf is surprised by the amount of energy required, while Thor thinks that for them to need items of this level, the danger must be enormous. He concludes it is an item from the powerful world of heroes. Thor and the others decide to show the laser pointer to Lukier, but first they comment that it would be good to clean the training field. Thor thanks them for the opportunity to use the place and offers to take care of the cleanup. Surprised, the warriors ask if they themselves would do that, while one replies excitedly with several yes, and the other desperate shouts no. Thor thanks them for the cooperation and apologizes for the trouble, while he wonders if people are talking about the training but decides not to worry. Meanwhile, the others comment among themselves that the maximum range of spells had been a problem, but now it didn't seem to be anymore, leaving them astonished. One of the girls blurts out in surprise that Thor-sama can create those items in a matter of minutes. This leaves the two onlookers, the Minotaur and the elf, clearly impressed and shaken by the revelation. A horned woman watches and confirms that those are the two commanders. One tries to interrupt in confusion, but another states that Thor-sama and Mabel are in the service of Her Majesty, the Demon King. The woman smiles intimidatingly, surprised they're really using that title, and asks them to tell the whole story, since she hasn't heard everything yet. The advisor Kurov hears from the two commanders the story about Thor being free to use strange items. Furious and sweating, he yells demanding that Thor appear immediately and give him an explanation. In the Empire, a man holds a glass of wine and, with a smile, comments that the time has finally come for negotiations between Garua and the demonic beings. The man says it's a great day to turn the Duke's family into puppets, using the demons as pawns. He talks about Ryzenga, the Flame General, and decides they should ally with him along with the Empire, laying out the steps of the plan. The man plans to trade silver with Ryzenga, believing he will accept the deal. In return, he proposes sending soldiers to face the next demonic beast. That way, he will obtain information about the Empire's borders directly from Ryzenga, and, with that, intends to sever the relationship between the general and the king. The man plans to spread rumors that Ryzenga is diverting silver, causing the Demon King's distrust and encouraging the Empire to believe it. This could spark rebellion against the Demon King and create internal chaos. He considers this a sublime strategy. The past of the Duke's family is shown, having suffered great humiliation. He recalls that his father's legend was not that of a sword saint, but of an eagle. Now he believes that, if everything goes well, the family's honor will be restored and raised above any previous standing. The man appears mounted on a winged horse, being acclaimed by the crowd. He believes that here begins the path to achieve glory, hearing applause and praise around him. The man appears in shock, looking upward as an aura of relief and comfort envelops him, as if seized by a sudden feeling of peace. The man shows confidence, saying he has given additional instructions and is eagerly awaiting the plan's results. Then he raises his glass and toasts, laughing loudly, declaring that the foolish demons will end up serving his interests. The scene shifts to the Demon King's territory, in a mining zone. Giant spider-like creatures appear, crawling through the dark area. They carry cocoons suspended on threads, revealing the hostile, dangerous environment of this territory. A group of men appears marching through the forest, led by a muscular, confident chief. They talk about the Demon King's territory. One reminds them it's home to dangerous demons and the Flame General. But the leader ignores the warning. Excited, he says there are treasures buried there that even Demihumans can't comprehend, and fires up the group by saying it's their job to take that treasure. The band responds with enthusiasm, shouting in support. The group's chief raises his huge weapon and says he doesn't care about generals or demons, because anything that appears in their way will be cut in half. His men laugh and shout excitedly, praising his strength. Suddenly, something unexpected appears, catching the chief's attention. He looks up surprised and asks what that is. One of the men is violently seized and begins to scream in despair as he's dragged away. Soon after, his body explodes in a brutal scene, spraying blood and pieces everywhere. The mercenaries are shocked as enormous demonic spiders emerge from the caves, attacking mercilessly. One of them panics, shouting for everyone to run, while the monsters advance, devouring those they find along the way. Amid the chaos, one man stares, terrified, at a gigantic creature that appears before him. The gigantic creature charges violently, lifting one of its flaming legs and smashing the ground with devastating force, scattering debris and dust throughout the forest. The destructive power makes it clear this is no ordinary enemy. The soldiers are brutally crushed by the monster's legs, as blood and bones shatter on impact. Soon, more spiders begin to move in the darkness, crawling toward the site. The scene cuts to a mysterious man watching from afar, holding a magic flame in his hand, with a great castle in the background. The boy holds a black cube-shaped stone and comments that he received it from Anasan. He's surprised because it's the first time he's seen a stone of the space element. An explanation appears. It is meteoric iron, a stone fallen from the dark space with attributes different from the Earth's materials, possessing the elements of space, darkness, and Earth. The successful appraisal of the stone awakens the space element, giving him the ability to add space magic to items he creates from now on. The boy thinks about how, since arriving in the Demon Lord's territory, he has been able to use more and more new elements. He thanks His Majesty the Demon Lord for the materials and the place he received. He remarks that elements like wood, fire, earth, metal, and water are from the other world, and now he also has the space element. Meanwhile, he looks at a messy room and thinks he still has some time, so he decides to clean the storeroom next door. He also remembers they told him there was something they wanted to show him later. Thor enters a storeroom full of items and gets excited by the things he finds, calling the place a true mountain of treasures. Among the objects, he finds a sword that resembles the first Demon Lord's and realizes it might be a magic sword. At that moment, someone knocks at the door calling for him, asking if he is inside. Thor examines the sword more closely and denies something in his thoughts. The demon miss appears wearing an elegant black dress, asking Thor's opinion and saying she intends to wear it to the next party. Thor, surprised and charmed, praises that the outfit suits her very well. Thor praises Lucia's beauty, but she asks not to be called Your Majesty by someone she considers a friend. With a smile, she orders that if he truly sees her as a friend, he should call her only by name. Thor agrees to call her Lucia, but suggests it would be better to keep the dress secret until the party. Lucia gets embarrassed, wondering if he really thinks the Lord would like it. Unable to hide her feelings, she ends up blushing, while Thor watches and thinks how cute she is. Lucia asks what Thor was doing, and he replies he was cleaning the storeroom. She shows a sword she found, and Thor notes it isn't the same size as the one on the statue. He asks if Lucia knows what it is, but she tosses the question back, asking his opinion about the item. Thor analyzes the sword found, explaining that it is made of iron, and its only attribute is strength, concluding it was likely just a prototype. He comments that someone must have tried to recreate the lost magic sword, but since it didn't resemble the original, it ended up abandoned. Lucia praises his analysis, while Thor shows that the blade is damaged and cannot cut, calling it a failed product. Lucia explains that in her grandfather's time there was a plan to revive the magic sword, created together by an elf and a dwarf, but the limit was only to increase strength. As proof, she tells this to Thor. Then he asks if he can keep the sword, and she answers there was no reason to ask, since the place was his atelier. Lucia formally hands the sword to Thor, who thanks her. Excited, he asks if he can create a true magic sword using that replica as a base, leaving Lucia surprised by his proposal. Thor reveals that one of his dreams is to create a sword that surpasses the Empire's sacred swords, but since he lacks combat skills, it would be useless for him to use. Therefore, he wishes to forge a great magic sword for Lucia, believing she could use it against the beasts that will soon need to be faced. Lucia listens intently, impressed by his determination. Thor confesses his desire to create a magic sword to help, but Lucia smiles and says that feeling makes her happy. However, she explains they don't need a magic sword to defeat the beasts this time, but rather support items that can attack from a distance. She makes it clear she prefers tools that aid in combat instead of common weapons. Thor understands her view, reflecting on how such support items truly help Lucia and the others fight more strategically. Thor gets excited and promises he'll see if he can create something like what Lucia requested. Determined, he says he understands perfectly. Lucia, a bit playful, comments that he isn't busy and permits it. Thor thanks her enthusiastically and runs off with energy to begin. Thor decides what he will create and shows the chosen design in the book. He confidently states his plan. While Lucia watches in surprise, she notes that the described item is a shiny black cylinder with a transparent blade attached to the tip. Thor explains that he needs a light magic stone and also a darkness one to create the item. He details that by surrounding light with darkness, it can be directed into a single beam. With Mabel helping, he begins the process by activating his super alchemy. Thor adds the wind element to bolster the light's reach. He concentrates, shrouding the light in darkness to direct it in a straight line, creating a powerful beam that can spread and strike at long distances. Thor activates his super alchemy and completes the creation of a new item. The result is a laser pointer, formed by the elements of light, darkness, and wind, described as a rare and powerful artifact, ideal for use against demonic beasts. Thor raises the newly crafted item with enthusiasm, declaring that he has managed to create the brave world's laser pointer. Lucia watches in surprise, trying to understand what it is about, while beside them, they confirm the catalog notes with the help of the translation memo. Thor shows the description of the laser pointer, which says it is essential for presentations, recommended for teachers, capable of transmitting instructions with precision, and even scaring creatures. Mabel reads and confirms that it is very clear in the description. Thor, not understanding what a presentation is, comments that it still seems like a great item. Mabel questions Thor about what the description of the laser pointer really means. He explains that it is a way for the commander to clearly indicate which enemy should be defeated, ensuring that the instructions are followed without failure. In the end, he concludes that this means the enemy will soon fall into silence. Thor and Mabel analyze the manual. She concludes that, since it says not to use on humans, the item must have been made to defeat demonic beasts. They interpret the phrase about competition as a reference to heroes competing over who defeated more monsters, understanding that presentation actually meant this competition. Mabel thanks Thor for the help, while he praises her understanding. They think about how the laser was already used by heroes to defeat powerful beasts from afar, with legends saying that an enemy was brought down in a second. Thor comments that, since it was only used against beasts, there are no records of it being used against demons or demihumans, and he concludes that if it can reach even the other side of the mountain, creatures will avoid getting close. They notice that the silhouette of the troublesome creature is the same bird beast, seen as the embodiment of fear. Thor concludes there is no doubt about it. He thinks that such a powerful object could change the course of a war, since the laser pointer assists in extending the reach of magic, making it a feared weapon in a world of heroes. An intimidating figure appears in the background, symbolizing the idea of a terrifying presentation. Thor stands firmly beside Mabel, who looks nervous. Then they decide to test the laser pointer, believing it will be perfect for examining beasts, and they confirm their decision with excitement. Thor and Mabel discuss how to fight against the demonic beast. He asks her to protect the rear since it is in danger. Meanwhile, a minotaur and an elf argue over who should hold the attacks, as the servants of the demonic beast Gargarosa, a giant spider with many smaller monsters, are far too numerous to defeat all at once. The elf complains that he cannot attack if there is no support in the rear. The demonic beast Gargarosa, a giant spider, always draws countless smaller monsters around it. The Minotaur charges forward as the vanguard to face it directly, while the elf provides support from farther back. However, this strategy does not guarantee safety, since the smaller monsters end up focusing on the elf, leaving him vulnerable. Thor observes and comments on this situation. Mabel watches from a distance, and Thor explains that the line marks the normal range of a spell. She comments that even from there, it would be difficult to hit the target. Then she asks if that is really the target, and Thor confirms that it is. Thor explains that the training consists of hitting the circle in the center of the target. He says he wants to see if the effective range improves using the laser pointer and, confident, decides to begin the test by saying, "Let's try it." Mabel sees the red dot of the laser on the target, and Thor asks her to cast the spell aiming at that light. She understands and fires Icicle Arrow, which lands squarely in the center of the target. Thor praises Mabel, impressed with the hit, while she, confused, admits that she does not understand how she managed to strike the target. They immediately decide to test from farther away. The next shot hits even at 1.5 times the normal distance, and later, at double the distance, the attack still strikes the center perfectly. The Minotaur insists that elves must stay at the rear during battles, but the elf counters that spells have limited range and need the perfect distance to be cast. They argue over the difficulty of this, and note that trying to attack from so far away would be madness. In the background, they notice someone training spells. The elf watches from afar as a beam of light appears on the horizon, piquing his curiosity. Soon after, a powerful shot strikes the target squarely, causing an impact and leaving the elf astonished at such accuracy and strength. Thor confirms that the spell was able to reach up to 3.5 times the normal distance, using the entire training field. He concludes that the experiment was a success, while Mabel and the other girl are surprised, not understanding how he managed to surpass that limit. Thor explains that the spell seems to be drawn to the magical flow left by the laser. He realizes that since the first shot, the attacks have been hitting exactly the same spot. Then he concludes that the laser creates a magical connection with the target, linking the spell directly to the illuminated point, which impresses everyone around. The spell is guided by the magical flow created by the laser, greatly increasing its power. The onlookers are shocked, saying it is an immense and dangerous force, and that items of this level can only come from the mighty world of heroes. Thor suggests that before going to show the results to Lukiar-sama, it would be good to clean the training field a bit. He thanks them for allowing the use of the place, but when he mentions cleaning, the two people responsible for the area panic. One of them replies nervously, "No, no, no," while the other says repeatedly, "Yes, yes, yes," showing that they do not want Thor and the group to do the cleaning themselves. Thor thanks them for the use of the field and apologizes for the trouble. While thinking about how people must be seeing that training, he decides not to worry for now. Meanwhile, the two caretakers comment that the maximum range of magic used to be a problem, but now it seems it no longer is. One of them tries to remember what they were talking about earlier, while the other realizes the situation, surprised. One of the girls comments in surprise that Thor-sama can build those items in just a matter of minutes. The revelation leaves the two elders incredulous, walking side by side in silence, clearly shaken by the information. A commander with long hair and horns comments as he sees the two, recognizing them as commanders. He asks in surprise what they were talking about, while the other nervously confirms that Thor-sama and Mabel are in the service of His Majesty, the Demon King. The commander then smiles darkly, curious about the strange item they used, and asks them to tell everything, since he has not yet heard the full story. The counselor Karuv, after hearing from the two commanders about Thor's freedom in using strange items, becomes furious, sweating and agitated. He demands that Thor appear immediately to give him an explanation. In the Empire, a man appears holding a drink, saying that the time has finally come. He declares that it is the moment for negotiations between Garua and the demonic beings. A man from the Empire says that, with those demons fools like dogs, it is the perfect time to turn the Duke's family into puppets. Then, through a magical vessel, he speaks with another man called Ryzenga, the Flame General. They decide they need to support the general along with the Empire, and they begin detailing the steps of the plan. The plan is explained in detail. They know that Ryzenga will accept the proposal in exchange for silver. The idea is to propose cooperation to eliminate monsters, offering soldiers as compensation to attack the next demonic beast. That way, they will get all the information about the borders with the Empire directly from Ryzenga. The final goal is to use this to weaken and break the relationship of trust between Ryzenga and the king. The man reveals the next step of the plan, to spread rumors that Ryzenga is diverting silver. This would generate distrust in the Demon King, and could even lead to open rebellion against him. With that, the Empire would gain an advantage, and weaken the bond of trust within the demon realm. He concludes, satisfied that this is a sublime strategy. It shows the past of the Duke's family, marked by a great humiliation that stained their name. He thinks about how this was never forgotten, but now he sees a chance to restore his honor. He compares his father's legacy to the legend of an eagle, believing that this will be the beginning of recovering the family's lost glory. The man appears mounted on a winged horse, being acclaimed by a crowd. He feels that this is the beginning of the path to glory, believing that he was born to fulfill this purpose. As he advances, he hears the applause and praise of the people around him, reinforcing even more his feeling of triumph and grand destiny. The man appears shouting intensely, with an expression of astonishment and impact. The word comfort appears in highlight, showing that he is overtaken by an overwhelming sensation or emotion, in contrast with his rigid and dramatic posture. The man appears satisfied and confident, saying that he has already given additional instructions and eagerly awaits the results of his great plan. Then, he raises a glass and toasts sarcastically, laughing loudly and mocking the foolish demons who, according to him, will end up serving his own interests. A man comments that he will have a meeting with the Empire's messenger, and his daughter replies that she does not believe anything bad will happen, but asks him to warn Agnes's guards. Before leaving, she also asks her father not to be rude with the people from the Empire, while he, a bit annoyed, thinks about situations that could cause misunderstandings. The daughter asks her father to treat the Empire's messenger with respect. The man, remembering his late wife as he looks at her, answers that he understands well, saying that even the Demon King himself respects the emissaries. He thinks about his loyalty and swears not to break his vow, even if he makes mistakes. Then he reflects that the attack of demonic beasts is an important point in the negotiations between the Empire and the Demon King's territory. The narrator explains that the vow of Ifrit has two meanings. The first is swearing loyalty before one's lord, giving body and soul, accepting even to lose one's life if the vow is broken. The second is when this vow is spoken to someone for whom one has feelings, symbolizing that these feelings burn like an eternal flame. The man reflects on the vow of Ifrit, recognizing its different meanings and how they crossed paths on the same day. He thinks about his father and son relationship, remembering it intensely. Clenching his fist, he admits that he always feels chills recalling it, since his initial intention was only to intimidate Thor and force him to listen. A man walks down the hallway accompanied by a woman, thinking that he wants to be an adult he does not need to feel ashamed of. Soon, a maid informs him that the messenger is already waiting for him, while a shadowy figure awaits. Marquis Garwa politely introduces himself to Ryzenga, saying he is honored to meet him. The general responds formally, explaining that the Demon King entrusted him with the lands near the border. Garwa praises his military reputation and recalls the stories of when, still young, Ryzenga defeated invading demonic beasts without help. Humbly, the general states that it is only an old story he is even ashamed to remember. Ryzenga begins the negotiation by showing documents about the attack of the demonic beasts, explaining that the creature has many subordinates and asking for cooperation. Marquis Garros, surprised by the general's calmness and politeness, agrees to provide between 100 and 200 soldiers to face Gargarosa, also asking about the rewards. Ryzenga confirms that there will be compensation. Marquis Garros asks to extend the deadline for the reward, suggesting up to 4 years. Ryzenga responds that he had already informed the Demon King that it would be done in 1 year, but says there is a way to adjust this. Then, Garua asks if the general could send the money directly to the Empire, hinting at a parallel agreement, and affirms that they would be grateful to him for it. Ryzenga asks whether Marquis Garua was telling him to deceive the Demon King, but Garua denies it, saying he only advises unity with the Empire. He suggests that sometimes there can be a calculation error in mining report, hinting that part of the resource could be diverted. Then he says the general would only need to send a small amount to the Empire, and in doing so would gain a powerful ally in him. Ryzenga says he doubts Marquis Garua is trustworthy, and the Marquis replies that informal deals must be made carefully. Next, Garua says he has a good idea and asks if Ryzenga knows Thor Rigas. Surprised, Ryzenga confirms and recognizes at once. It's him. Marquis Garua, with a malicious smile, proposes that if the deal goes through, all responsibility should fall on Thor Rigas. Then the other man directly suggests getting rid of him. Ryzenga, surprised, reacts when he hears the proposal. Excited, Marquis Garua suggests a plan. Put all the blame on Thor Rigas, saying he would have appropriated the silver and tricked the general into rewriting the document. That way, the general would be free of trouble. Worked up, he raises his arms and declares that Thor would use his life to serve both the Empire and the general, calling it a brilliant idea. Laughing extravagantly, the Marquis says that useless man will help their partnership, and that even he will like it, guaranteeing General Ryzenga's safety and comparing the relationship to a honeymoon. Meanwhile, Thor asks to be treated normally from now on, and tells the general he hopes to be invited to visit his territory next time. Showing confidence, General Ryzenga smashes the table with his fist, furious at the proposal to dump responsibility on Thor Rigas. In a grave tone, he repeats, "Let Thor Rigas take full responsibility. Is that what you're saying?" Then he stares at the Marquis and angrily asks if that decision was only his, preparing to ask another question. Ryzenga presses the Marquis, asking directly whether the Emperor truly knew about that proposal. The Marquis, trying to cover it up, answers that it was a duty of nobles to serve the Empire, and that it wasn't enough to report only to the Emperor. Ryzenga firm says he understands, and that he's relieved, making it clear he does not despise the Empire itself, but that kind of deal. The Marquis, surprised, thinks about the general's harsh reply. General Ryzenga, with a terrifying dark expression, confronts the Marquis up close, while the latter sweats cold with fear. In a firm, threatening tone, Ryzenga orders, "Silence. Don't open your mouth again." Overtaken by fury, his body wreathed in flames, Ryzenga glares at the Marquis and confronts him harshly. He reminds him that deceiving the Demon King is already a great sin, but falsely accusing Thor, his benefactor, of every crime would be unforgivable. Speaking firmly, he says to the Marquis, "Stop being a nuisance." At the same time, he states with conviction that Thor will become his family's son-in-law, joining with Agnes with the heart of the Ryzenga family. Terrified, the Marquis recoils before his overwhelming presence. Shocked, the Marquis cries out in indignation on hearing about friendship and marriage with his daughter, calling Thor a thing. Desperate, he tries to justify himself, saying he will inform the Emperor personally, and insisting that, if the deal is accepted, the general will also benefit. Furious, the general expels the Marquis with an imposing shout. Frightened, the Marquis panics, making his fear plain before the threatening presence. Consumed by anger and a blazing aura, the general declares he will never again speak to someone so vile, and orders him never to appear before him again. Duke Rigas falls into despair, while his daughter tries to grasp the situation. The general recognizes his own immaturity, admitting he also still has much to grow. Days later, in the Demon Lord's territory, a report from Ryzenga detailing all of Marquis Garua's actions was delivered. The document stated how Garua attempted to divert silver from the mines and even planned to use Thor as a scapegoat. In return, the Empire had offered Ryzenga military cooperation. Shrouded in dark flames, the Demon Lord reflects in surprise on the situation, admitting he did not expect things to end that way. A messenger delivers a letter from the Dolgaria Empire to the Demon Lord. The letter states that the proposal did not represent the will of the Empire, but only of some border lord. The Demon Lord understands that the proposal referred to the plan to use Thor, and thinks about the fact that he was sent there as a hostage, a human sacrifice. The counselor comments that only she and His Majesty know the situation, and offers to speak with Thor. The Demon Lord refuses, saying he will tell him himself, since Thor is his alchemist. Meanwhile, the princess, moved, thinks she never imagined Thor was being treated so cruelly. The Demon Lord takes responsibility, saying he was the one who allowed the negotiations with the Empire, and therefore must bear the results. He asks the counselor to go to Thor and tell him, but she thinks it will be very painful news for him. Even so, she decides she will do it personally when she visits Thor's room. The counselor thanks Thor and acknowledges that thanks to Ryzenga's Oath of Flame, she could fully trust the general's report. She states that Ryzenga hid nothing and told only the truth. She thinks that if he had concealed anything, there would be deep distrust between them, and perhaps the enemy's crafty plan would have worked. Carrie declares it was thanks to Thor that the general's oath was possible, and, as Prime Minister, he feels indebted to him. He promises to do everything to grant any wish of Thor's. The king asks what he would do if Thor asked for something excessive, like a mountain of magic item, leaving Carrie without an immediate answer. Thor and the girls are gathered drinking tea and having fun, laughing together. Meanwhile, another character watches the scene in silence, clearly bothered and sweating nervously at the lively mood among them. Thor chats excitedly with Lucy and another girl about items from the hero's world, while they enjoy his explanation. However, the twin-horned girl starts to get distressed, thinking she needs to tell Thor what really happened during the negotiations with the Empire. The twin-horned girl thinks about the secrets of the deal made by Thor's father and the plan to bury it along with the crimes in darkness. Determined to reveal everything, she tells herself she will speak the truth after finishing her tea and sweets, but suddenly she's startled, as if she realized something. She thinks about how painful it is to speak about what Thor's father did at that moment, since they are just in a friendly get-together. She thinks she should have told him about the Empire in the throne room, but remembers that Thor always talked about his life in a simple way. Decided, she gulps down the tea and prepares to reveal it, calling Thor's name. Lucy tries to tell Thor about the negotiations with the Empire but hesitates. Nervous, she ends up downplaying the severity of the situation and says only that there were some small problems during the talks. Thor, unsuspecting, believes it and answers calmly. Still nervous, Lucy starts telling Thor that during the negotiations, a Marquis of the Empire said something strange. She explains he tried to propose a secret deal to use Ryzenga in silver smuggling. Thor is surprised while she shows the weight of what she heard, calling it absurd coming from a foolish noble. Lucy tries to keep explaining the secret deal the Marquise wanted to make with Ryzenga, but starts to tremble and drops her cup. Thor and Mabel jump up, alarmed for her, while Lucy seems confused, not understanding why her reaction startled them so much. Unable to hold back her tears, Lucy starts crying, revealing the pain of what she discovered. Shocked, Thor understands her words and realizes they tried to erase him and dump all the blame on him. Sobbing uncontrollably, Lucy reveals to Thor that the Marquise's plan was actually to kill him. Between hiccups, she tries to explain, but breaks down in tears, while Thor and the others ask her to calm down. Still shaken, Lucy confirms the gravity of what happened and says she can't believe Thor's father was capable of that. Meanwhile, Thor, with a calm look, admits he understands, because it was exactly the kind of attitude he expected from his father. Still upset, Lucy says she felt very bad for Thor and didn't know what to do anymore, thinking how it would sadden him. Thor tries to soothe her, saying it was embarrassing for her to cry for him, but calls her a good person. Meanwhile, Mabel thinks that exiling Thor should already have been enough, not understanding why his father would go so far, raising the question of the real reason they tried to use and frame him. Thor explains that everything happened because of the Empire's policies, which value military strength above all. He comments that his father, Duke Legis, is also a strong warrior, and that his grandfather, known as the Sword Saint, ended up being killed by bandits after growing old and sinking into drink. Lucy listens in surprise, trying to grasp the weight of these revelations. Thor says that as a child he didn't remember the details well, but he understood that no matter how strong someone was, there would always be a weakness to exploit. He realized that the stronger he became, the more people would try to defeat him to gain fame. So he concluded that chasing only strength would be pointless, and decided to use his alchemy skills to improve people's lives. Lucy listens closely, impressed by his view. Lucy and Mabel say Thor's way is unique and suits him, but he recalls that Duke Legis would never let him think that way. Thor then thinks that the people of the Empire try to imitate the founding hero, but since they can never reach such an existence, they resort to ever more extreme measures. They use anything, power, fame, or tools to reach their goals. Lucy asks if that's why the Duke tried to sacrifice Thor, and says she can't understand such a thing. Thor answers that he can't either, but reveals that after everything that happened, he is tired of the Legis family, so he decides he will change his name to distance himself from that past. Thor decides to abandon the Legis family name and take his mother's. With a firm smile, he announces that from that moment on he will be called Thor Cannon, leaving everyone surprised by his decision. Lucy and Mabel react happily to Thor's new name, saying it sounds really good. He explains that, officially, he still has to use the Legis surname in the Demon Lord's territory because he is a hostage of the Empire, but asks that when he is only with them, they call him Cannon. Both agree excitedly, accepting his request. Thor calls out to Lucy and calmly asks her to let go of his hand. Embarrassed, she apologizes and explains she acted on impulse upon hearing about the suffering he had gone through, feeling sadness and regret for not having been by his side at that time. Thor thanks Lucy for her concern, but jokes that he would like to sleep holding hands with her. Flustered, Lucy tries to explain herself, admitting she really wanted that. Blushing, she confesses her desire, leaving Thor surprised and at a loss, calling her cute while he gets embarrassed too. Mabel reminds them that Lucy cannot spend the night in Thor's room, since the area is restricted to men. Even so, Lucy admits she spoke on impulse. Thoughtful, Thor believes there may be a way to make that wish happen, and starts planning a solution using his skills as an alchemist. Thor shows Lucy something he found in his alchemy books, an idea that could be useful to solve the situation. Surprised, Lucy and Mabel react with excitement. With Lucy's permission, Thor begins preparations to create the necessary item. With all the preparations ready, Thor sets out the materials needed to create the Hero World item, an empty magic stone, a large amount of dried pea shells, and a pure white sheet. Lucy and Mabel watch closely as Thor announces they will start the process, placing the sheet first. Thor activates his creative alchemy to refine the materials. The magic stone begins to dissolve into the fabric, spreading its energy like melting ice. Lucy watches in awe, and, following Thor's instructions, imagines the cloth stretching as the magic fuses into the sheet. The fabric reacts to the magic and turns into a stretchy, pliable material, surprising Lucy. Thor continues the process by applying the same refinement to the pea pods, preparing them for fusion. Confident, he focuses on the final diagram, ready to put the finishing touches on the creation. Thor arranges the item structure in his mind, placing the shells inside and the fabric outside. He adds empty magic stones to store energy, wind for breathability, and water to make it soft. Then he raises his hands and activates his creative alchemy, beginning the final creation process. Thor completes the creation and presents the result, a body pillow made of fabric and bean shells refined with magic, able to change shape and temperature as the user wishes, and also washable and durable. The pillowcase, reinforced with the light element, even allows changing colors and patterns. Lucy looks on, amazed and impressed, calling it incredible. Thor hands the finished pillow to Lucy and asks her to read the item description. The product is explained as an advanced model body pillow, made to imitate the feeling of hugging someone dear. The fabric is soft like human skin, elastic and moldable, and the internal spheres let you adjust the shape freely. The item's function is to provide a sense of closeness, letting the user feel as if connected to someone special whenever they want. Lucy questions whether it was really possible that a hero world pillow was something ordinary, remembering that the description said, "Connect with your beloved." She considers that items from that world always carry deeper meanings or codes, and that they are not sold to just anyone because of the great power they hold. Impressed, she says this makes sense coming from someone who assists Thor. In the end, she turns to Thor, wanting to know his opinion about all of this. With conviction, Thor says that the hero world pillow has the ability to transform into a human shape. Lucy is shocked by the revelation, reacting startled and incredulous on hearing it, while everyone around also shows surprise at the unexpected idea. Thor explains to Lucy that one of the summoned heroes had the ability to freely change appearance, using shape-shifting magic. Lucy recalls that this technique worked with granules of magical power, and starts to think about the mechanism. He also says this hero even used such an ability to infiltrate the Demon King's army, and when his identity was discovered, ended up transforming into a dragon. Lucy confirms that in the Demon King's territory there is something similar, magic granules that can change color and take any shape. Thor explains that the hero used these granules to create a false body, wearing it like a complete outfit, similar to a full-body costume. Lucy realizes that the created pillow has the same effect mentioned in the hero's legends, tied to the magic granules that can change shape. Thor confirms and asks Mabel to infuse the pillow with her magical power to test it. Meanwhile, everyone thinks about the creativity and impressive skill of the hero world, finding it frightening in its ingenuity. Mabel begins transferring her magical power into the pillow, and it reacts immediately, absorbing the energy through the magic stones embedded in the fabric. Lucy realizes this will make the object take Mabel's form. Thor explains that magical power carries the user's individual information, and by placing the cover infused with that energy over the pillow, it takes on the corresponding form. Lucy holds the enchanted cover, watching it closely as she begins wrapping it around the pillow. Confident, Thor encourages her and says her name, showing support. Lucy thinks to herself that she hopes it really works. Then the pillow starts to emit an intense glow, signaling that the transformation is about to happen. The pillow begins to shine brightly, activating all the combined properties: the elasticity of the fabric, the shape memory of the pea shells, the magical attributes, and the filled magic stones. All of this comes together to give it a physical form. The energy converges at a single point, and a human silhouette begins to form in the middle of the radiant light, taking on someone's appearance before everyone's eyes. The magic pillow finally takes shape, and before everyone's eyes, a perfect life-sized copy of Mabel appears. Lucy, shocked, watches as the figure moves like a living body. Mabel, surprised and excited, recognizes at once that replica is exactly the same as herself. Everyone is impressed to see the magic pillow take Mabel's shape, acting as if it were her. Lucy is astonished by the realism, while Thor explains that it is an item from the hero world, able to obey Mabel's commands and imagination. The replica then moves about cheerfully, showing its ability to act according to her wishes, leaving everyone even more surprised. Mabel celebrates the magic pillow's success, saying that even Lucy's wish to hold hands while sleeping could come true. However, Thor notices something strange and undoes the transformation, revealing that the attempt had failed. Lucy and Mabel are surprised by the sudden revelation. Mabel is startled to realize the pillow really had transformed into her, but Thor explains that, despite the appearance, it didn't show even half of her true charm. He says what makes Mabel special is not just her beauty, the silver hair, fair skin, and elegant ears, but also her kindness, strength, and how she has always looked after him since his arrival in the Demon Lord's territory. Thor says Mabel has always been by his side, supporting him in all experiments, and that part of her charm is the simple fact that her presence brings him peace. He explains the pillow conveyed none of that true appeal, which is why he called it a failure. Even so, he adds that the pillow version of Mabel was still cute, leaving Lucy moved by his words. Lucy asks Thor to stop, since Mabel was at her limit after all that. Thor admits he overdid it, but says that with time he can fulfill her wish. He hands something over and assures it will work. Mabel thanks him excitedly, while Lucy, still embarrassed, accepts at once, asking to sleep together that night. Lucy says the real Mabel is far more important to her than any copy made by the pillow, asking them not to forget that. Embarrassed, Thor agrees and realizes how Mabel must feel in such situation. In the end, Lucy takes her leave, leaving him pondering her words. Thor thinks that he still has time before Lady Lucy goes to sleep and decides to prepare more fabrics with magic stones. Even remembering that Lucy said it wasn't necessary, he thinks it would be too late if an emergency happened. Worried about the subjugation of the magic beast, he decides to create something essential, Lucy's enchanted sword. At night, Lucy calls for Mabel, who answers embarrassed. The two realize they had underestimated Thor, since he managed to make the wish of sleeping hand in hand possible. In bed, Thor lies between Lucy and Mabel, but beside him there is a pillow body in the shape of Thor, letting them fulfill the request in an unexpected way. Lying beside Thor, Lucy and Mabel realize they forgot an important detail. It was impossible to get any sleep in that situation. With hearts racing and thoughts in a jumble, neither of them could relax, and so the night passed restlessly, without them managing to fall asleep. The scene shifts to the mining region, surrounded by mountains. In the nearby forest, several giant cocoons hang from the trees, creating a strange, threatening mood. Among the shadows, a bear appears, watching intently with gleaming eyes. The bear walking through the forest is brutally attacked by a huge spider, which traps it with its legs and easily subdues it. Soon after, an entire group of monstrous spiders appears, surrounding the area, while an even greater, more menacing presence emerges from the shadows, revealing multiple eyes shining in the dark. An observer realizes the new species of magic beast has spread quickly, building nests throughout the forest and ravaging the region. He notes the reproduction speed has surpassed all expectations, making the situation even more dangerous. Recognizing that even a single spider would be a threat, he concludes he must inform the Demon Lord at once, as he can't even imagine how many underlings now exist. The warrior mounted on his creature thinks about the threat of the magic spiders. If there are hundreds or even 1,000 of them, the situation would become disastrous. He concludes that both the Demon Lord's army and the empires would suffer huge losses in a direct clash. With only a few days left before the subjugation of the magic beast, the mood in the castle grows more serious. Thor hands over an important document, drawing the attention of the gathered leaders. The Demon Lord watches in silence, while Lucy shows a confident, determined look in the face of what's coming. Thor walks cheerfully beside Mabel, saying the time had finally come. She carries a stack of books and answers. Minister Zagran arrives to escort Princess Liana. He brings additional orders from the Emperor, instructing that Liana proceed immediately to the Demon Lord's territory. The Ministry of Military Affairs is already assembling the troops, and departure must take place without delay. Liana is startled to learn she must depart at once, but Zagran reproves her, reminding her that the Emperor's orders are not to be questioned. Sophia asks him to take good care of her sister, and wishes for Liana to be careful, but Zagran cuts in coldly, saying the matter does not concern Sophia, instructing her to focus on her recovery until the time comes to fulfill her own responsibility. Sophia tries to defend Liana, and scolds Zagran for his rudeness, but he insists on haste, saying there is no time to lose. At that moment, Liana interrupts, and firmly answers the question of what the ideal princess is. She declares that it is the one who acts in accordance with His Majesty's wishes, demonstrating her absolute loyalty to the Emperor. The troops were already assembled and ready to depart, while Sophia watched in silence, worried. Liana, for her part, walked firmly at the head of the soldiers, carrying in her gaze the determination and responsibility to act as the ideal princess in the name of the Empire. Meanwhile, in the Demon Lord's territory, the subjugation unit of the Gargarosa beast advanced south along the main road. Their destination was the mountainous region located in the southern part of the Demon Lord's territory. The unit was composed of the Minotaur Infantry Division, the Elven Mage Division, and a logistics division responsible for transporting supplies, weapons, and armor. Someone had suggested to Kelvisan that they use compact storage to carry the supplies, but she rejected that idea for a specific reason. They explained that if they placed only a single compact storage on the wagon, the soldiers would feel insecure, thinking there were not enough supplies. Therefore, transporting provisions visibly also served to reassure the troops, showing that everything was properly prepared. Thor wishes for everything to go smoothly, while Mabel is reminded to focus on her responsibilities. Mabel declares firmly that she will protect Lord Thor with her very life. Thor is surprised by such determination, but she continues, saying that he is a very important person to her. She also states that he is essential to the Demon Lord himself and to the entire demon territory. Thor thanks Mabel for her dedication, saying he feels the same. Excited, Mabel promises to destroy any spider beast that appears on the way in Thor's name. He, in turn, comments that Lady Loki has already warned him many times, but assures he will inspect the holy sword from a safe place without exposing himself. Meanwhile, Thor states he will do his best to find a good position,